Here. All set.
All right. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 13th edition of the Town of Garner Planning Commission meeting. We'll just go through real quickly the conduct. Actually, we'll come back to that in a minute. Let's do the roll call first, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. I will call the roll. Gina Avon. John Blasco.
Here.
Claire Fullerton could not be with us tonight, so I will call Philip Jefferson.
Here.
Vang Mao.
Here.
Sherry Phillips.
Here.
Michael Voiland.
Here.
That's 6 members present.
Thank you very much. I believe Mr. Jefferson has volunteered for the invocation tonight.
Thank you. Sure. Let's bow our heads. Dear Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to do the work of the town of Garner. We thank you for the beautiful day that you provided for us, and we ask that you give us guidance and wisdom as we make the decisions for the town, the best of its residents and its neighbors. We ask this in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much. We have before us the meeting minutes from the previous meeting. Is there any discussion or conversation on those minutes, or do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any last chance for comments, questions? Let's go ahead and do a vote.
The motion on the floor is to approve the minutes as presented. I will call the vote. Gina Avon. John Blasco.
Aye.
Philip Jefferson.
Aye.
Vang Mao. Sherry Phillips. Michael Voiland.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Thank you very much. All right, before we get too far into our old and new business, I would like to suggest, unless there's any objections on the floor, that we switch the order of cases tonight in respect for our applicant at the CZ SP 2004 4700 Guy Road, and put that one first. Are there any objections to altering the order? All right, I think that will get them in and out as quickly as we can. So just a moment of code of conduct. As Brian had mentioned earlier, if you intend on speaking tonight, there is a sign-in sheet outside the chamber, so please sign in and fill out that form. Also, we ask that as you come up to the podium in the center of the room to speak, we ask that you state your name, address for the record, and we'll give you a chance to speak. So the overall conduct of our planning commission this evening, this is not a scheduled public hearing. However, the meeting is open to the public so that you can obtain information about items on the agenda. The meeting will be conducted in the following order for each agenda item. The first will be a staff overview of the request, followed by a presentation by the applicant and others in support, as well as comments by speakers in opposition to the request. There will be questions from the commission. Following the questions, there will be a comments or a vote by the commission. For each agenda item, comments by the applicant and proponents are limited to 10 minutes, and comments by opponents are limited to 10 minutes. We request that the comments not be repetitive, and where possible, that the spokesperson is designated to present the views of a larger group. We appreciate all your cooperation with that. So let's move on to case CZ SP 2004 4700 Guy Road.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. This is a conditional rezoning request with a commercial site plan attached as a condition. The property is located on Guy Road, which is east of here in the eastern part of town near the Johnson County line. The public hearing was held on August the 17th, and the Planning Commission did recommend approval. The specific request is to rezone 6.26 acres from single-family residential R40 to service business conditional use district 233 to construct 20,000 square feet of commercial space that would include some outdoor area for storage. And the applicant has proposed a list of permissible uses for this site. So this is a map of the rezoning boundary outlined in orange. Highway 70 runs along north of the site, kind of southeast to northwest. Guy Road runs through the intersection of Highway 70. The predominant land use in this area is commercial. There is a public utility, it's I believe, natural gas utility directly across the street. To the northeast, we have a junkyard, a salvage yard. Going west, we do have a convenience store, fuel sales, and also a couple businesses. I believe there's a auto rental place in the building next door. So there's some like highway corridor type commercial uses, and the solar farm is located a little farther to the west. This is Guy Road looking south. The rezoning site is located here on the left side of the road as you head south, with the natural gas utility facility on the right side, or the west side of Guy Road. This is the current zoning out here in this area. The areas in red are zoned heavy commercial or service business. The lighter colors are agricultural R40 zoning. We've had a few zoning cases east of Auburn, Knightdale, Rayner Road, but not many. The most recent case was in 2017 when the Garner did the ETJ zoning expansion of this area, and it does include the rezoning site tonight. We've had a couple commercial zonings near Camping World in 2016. The existing zoning is residential 40, which allows single-family modular manufactured homes, schools, churches, telecommunications towers, solar farms, agricultural uses, civic lodges, and parks. Any land that's subdivided has to meet a minimum of 40,000 square feet in size. This is a conditional use request, so the applicant has proposed the following use restrictions. So service business allows about 70 different uses. So the applicant is voluntarily restricting the use down to 17. And those are listed on the following slides. We have uses under government facilities, uses under utilities, office uses, uses under retail sales and service, self-service storage, vehicle sales and service, light industrial, manufacturing and production, warehouse and freight movement, waste-related services, and wholesale sales. In addition to the list of uses, there is also a condition that development of this site shall be completed in conformance with the approved site plan. So there is a development plan attached to the rezoning. We've briefly already discussed the community character and the development pattern. Highway 70 is a major thoroughfare. Guy Road is also a major thoroughfare coming in from Johnson County. And there are some retail uses and commercial uses along Highway 70 in this vicinity. For the neighborhood meeting, we identified 21 different property owners within the 300-foot notification radius. And there were 2 neighborhood meetings. A Zoom remote meeting was held on April the 6th, and an in-person meeting was held on July the 27th, with no one in attendance. And I'll stop here, and actually I can cover this if this is, yeah. Going over the traffic. There was not a traffic impact analysis required for this request. The Ncdot traffic counts are taken in odd number of years, so the 2021 counts will come out next year or next summer. So these are the counts for Guy Road and Highway 70 East, and the source is Ncdot. So Highway 70 has a lot more traffic at around 30,000 trips per day. Guy Road has less traffic. The most recent count DOT did was in 2015, and that was around 7,200 trips per day. So it's probably a little higher than that number. Infrastructure, roads, and access. The site will be accessed by 2 driveways from Guy Road. The project is located on the east side of Guy Road, just south of Highway 70. So Guy Road, as part of the development of the site, Guy Road will have to be improved to half of a Town of Garner major collector, which is a 49-foot back-to-back section within a 74-foot right-of-way. Curb, gutter, and sidewalks will be installed. The right-of-way out there, I believe, is 60 feet wide. So the improvements would be to do half along the frontage of this site. I will stop there, and Jeff Triesenberg, our planning director, will pick up from here, and I will help him with the slides.
Thanks, David. Good evening, everybody. Pinching in for Allison. She's doing some online training for Board of Adjustment meetings tonight. But I think this one's fairly straightforward. I will just note that this is still a fairly detailed plan that you are seeing, as this was submitted prior to our 160D adoption. Going forward, we probably won't have quite as much detail on these plans at this time, but just to give you a quick overview of it, it is for flex space and warehouse. The site is a little over 6¼ acres. The minimum lot size for the district is just 6,000 square feet, so we are well in excess of that. They are required in providing at least 11.5% of tree canopy through both existing and replacement plantings. The uses that will likely occur within these structures. Class 6 is our most stringent category, so we can safely say that we are providing at least the minimum required buffers, if not more, depending on the use going forward, and those are outlined for you here. Street buffers, again, going with that Class 6 use and knowing what's across the street with the natural gas site. That would be 15 feet along Guy Road for the street buffer, and that's where your street trees and any screening materials will be. They will be provided along Guy Road. There are overhead wires, so this is one of those cases where we will not be requiring a canopy tree, but an ornamental understory tree instead. This location was not within a parks acquisition area according to Parks and Rec plan. And additionally, there is no open space required since this is a commercial development that only applies to residential. The inspections department, together with the fire inspectors there, have reviewed and preliminarily approved this plan. There are also no environmentally sensitive areas on the site. There is a stream just a little bit further to the east, but Guy Road is largely a ridge line, being that this site is right up on it. There's not much in the way of drainage features. It's pretty high and dry. This is commercial development that is not located within a watershed protection area. The site is, though, subject to water quality requirements for both nitrogen and water quantity requirements for the 1, 10, and 25-year storms. This plan does have a dry detention pond with a level spreader, vegetated filtering strip to satisfy all of the water quality and quantity requirements. And then, as with most projects, a nitrogen offset, the buy down will still be required with this project. We do have a City of Raleigh water out here connecting over to Johnston County. So they will, for now, just be connecting to the water line. For right now, this will, whatever bathroom and other facilities that they need, will be served by a septic system. And here is the site plan. You see that there are two entrance drives, one to the north and one to the south, located a pretty decent distance from the property lines and straddling the entrance on the opposite side of the road. You see there kind of the phase 1 and phase 2 of the building, as well as outdoor storage to the rear. All of that is enclosed, screened, and vegetated. Of course, there's not much in the way of residential or offending uses close by. So this is a pretty good location for this particular type of use. The minimum parking will be reevaluated when they do submit their zoning compliance permit for the specific use or uses that will occupy the building. But currently it does meet our parking minimums for the most likely of the intent uses for the property, the ones that will bring the most office employees and site workers who might be picking up a vehicle. And finally, the proposed lighting does meet our requirements of the ordinance, as well as meeting our staff recommendations for LED fixtures. Again, those are for fixtures to have zero uplight, low glare, and a warm light, exhibiting color temperature of no more than 4,000 Kelvin.
I can pick it up from here. The public hearing was held on August the 17th, and there were no comments. Plan consistency. When considering a rezoning request, the Planning Commission is required by state statute to make a written recommendation regarding the consistency of the zoning proposal with the town's current comprehensive plan and other applicable adopted plans. A determination of inconsistency with the plan does not preclude a rezoning request from being found to be reasonable. In those cases where a request is deemed inconsistent yet reasonable, an amendment to the comprehensive plan is automatically made upon approval of the request. So we're going to go through the different plans. The first is the Garner Forward Future Land Use Map, and this site is designated as Light Industrial Center, and recommended uses would include warehousing, light manufacturing, office, warehouse, flex space type uses. So the proposed use is consistent with the recommendations of the future land use map. The transportation plan, the request is consistent. The transportation plan calls for Guy Road to be widened to a 3-lane cross section, and that will be done as part of the development. The request is also consistent with the Parks, Recreation, Greenways, and Cultural Resources Master Plan. This area is not in a land acquisition area, therefore staff finds this project consistent with the Parks, Recreation, Greenways, and Cultural Resources Master Plan. Consistency statement. This request to rezone approximately 6.26 acres from single-family residential R40 to service business conditional use district 233 includes road frontage improvements with curb, gutter, and sidewalk to accommodate the future cross-section of Guy Road. The proposed site plan and list of uses are the typical mix of uses customary to meeting the objectives of the light industrial center on the future land use map. Therefore, this request may be found consistent with adopted land use plans. Reasonableness. In addition to approving a statement regarding plan consistency upon the advice of the Planning Commission, the Town Council must also approve a statement of reasonableness when making their decision. Staff recommendation. Staff recommends the planning commission find this request consistent with the adopted town plans as detailed in section 6 of your staff report. And the recommended motion is here. I move that the planning commission accept the consistency statement detailed in section 6 of this report as their own written recommendation regarding the consistency of the request of the town's adopted land use plans, and recommend approval of case number CZSP 20-04 to the town council. And that concludes our presentation. We'll be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here as well.
All right, thank you, David. Appreciate your presentation. Before we get to the applicant, are there any questions for staff? All right, I just had a couple questions. Just confirm or clarify that the site plan is a condition of this request. So if this project were to fall through for some reason, it would come back through with another case. Is that correct? Or is that?
I believe that's correct. So if the project gets approved and the project doesn't, the site plan never moves forward and someone wants to come build something different, then they'd have to probably come back in and get it approved again.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that kind of, I think, answers my next question, but I just wanted to make sure that staff was comfortable with the zoning conditions in terms of the uses, and that staff, just staff is comfortable with those suggested uses, and there's nothing on that list that maybe they wish they had that they're not getting.
We negotiated the list of uses with the applicant, and we're comfortable with them.
Okay.
And this site does back up to that salvage yard on 70, so
Yeah.
it's, we believe this would be a compatible use for that area.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure that there's some uses that are not being provided that maybe you might wanted, but if you're good, I'm good. So that's good. I had one other question. Given that I believe Guy Road is not improved at all at this point, was there any consideration about fee in lieu for the road improvements since it is such a small portion of that road?
I will let somebody else answer that question, either Gabby or Jeff.
It's like Gabby's walking up.
Gabby's okay.
Yes, so trying to remember if there was any, typically we prefer to, as long as it's not going to be disruptive to traffic, we prefer to have them, at the very least, dedicate the right-of-way and leave it set up for when the entire corridor does eventually get widened to that ultimate section.
Okay.
So that was the reasoning.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just, looking at what's out there now, some of those uses may not change for a long time. So I just didn't know if you wanted the extra pavement out there and impervious surface, but.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just sometimes harder to come back and then have to do that later.
Certainly. Understood. All right. Thank you. That's all the questions I had. Does the applicant wish to speak?
Good evening, everyone. Pam Porter with TMTLA Associates, 5011 South Park Drive in Durham. Thank you, David and Jeff, for your presentations, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right.
I have just a comment or so. I've skimmed through the site plans provided, and if the road widening is as proposed, which appears to be putting the water line, which appears to be a new water line in the pavement, it appears this is a Ncdot maintained road. They may not be supportive of that. So there needs to be some conversation with Ncdot about placing new water lines in the pavement.
Right, I believe our civil engineer has had those conversations
Okay.
with DOT, and they have preliminarily signed off on it, but we'll make sure that DOT is okay with what we're proposing.
Okay, good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? All right. I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I will ask if there's anyone in attendance who would like to speak in favor of the project. Seeing none, is there anyone in attendance who'd like to speak in opposition of the project? All right. Seeing none, bring it back to the commission. Do we have a motion?
I will move that the Planning Commission accept the consistency statement detailed in Section 6 of this report as their own written recommendation regarding the consistency of the requests with the town's adopted land use plans, and recommend approval of CZSP 2004 to the Town Council.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion before we take a vote? All right. Brian?
The motion on the floor is to accept the presented consistency statement and recommend approval of CZSP 2004 to the Town Council. I will call the vote. Gina Avent?
Aye.
John Blasco?
Aye.
Philip Jefferson?
Aye.
Vang Mao?
Aye.
Sherry Phillips? Michael Voiland? It's unanimous.
All right, thank you. That one, the easy one is out of the way. This one I feel like may take a little bit longer, so let's move on to our next one, CZPD 2002 Mahler's Creek.
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, this is a conditional use zoning request with a master plan attached as a condition. So the specific request is to rezone approximately 8.6 acres from single-family residential 12 and approximately 63.8 acres from residential single-family R40, a total of 72.2 acres, to plan residential development conditional use district 12 for the development of a single-family community of 170 homes at a density of 2.4 units per acre. So this map shows the rezoning and project boundary outlined in orange. We have Bryan Road that runs along the eastern boundary of the site. We have Everwood subdivision directly to the south. We have several neighborhoods to the west along Benson Road. There are some open space lots that's in between those neighborhoods and this project site. To the north, we have some neighborhoods that are not currently inside the town limits. Hillendale is one of them. They are in the Garner zoning, and those were, I guess, originally developed under the county standards. This is a Google Street View looking south on Bryan Road. This is the curve here. And the rezoning site, project site, is located on the right side as you head south on Bryan Road. And on the left side is some agricultural land that's currently used for that purpose. This map shows the existing zoning out here. We have a small portion of the project site zoned R12, and the remaining areas zoned residential 40. Everwood subdivision is zoned R12. Also, the single-family neighborhoods to the west, to the north, along Fox Trap Court and Fox Walk Path. Some of those lots are zoned R12. Then you have R15 directly to the north, and then you move into R20 zoning. So the neighborhoods along the south and the west are currently annexed in the town limits on public water and sewer, whereas the neighborhoods directly to the north are on well and septic. We have a history of rezoning cases in this area. The most recent case was Grove at White Oak, which is at the intersection of Bryan and Ackerman. And that was rezoned from R40 to R9 Conditional Use District 219. We have Clifford rezonings on Clifford Road, Bryan Road, Ackerman. The PRD neighborhood called Ridgemore on Ackerman Road, that was rezoned in 2017. And we have, the oldest case we have on file is from 2004. So just briefly going over the existing zoning, the total acreage is 72.2 acres, and it breaks down into 63.87 acres are currently zoned R40, and uses permitted in the R40 zoning, single-family, modular, manufactured homes, schools, churches, telecommunications towers, solar farms, agricultural uses, civic lodges, and parks. Minimum lot size is 40,000 square feet. The smaller portion, 8.68 acres, is zoned residential 12, and permissible uses include single-family, modular, cluster developments, churches, community centers, and the minimum lot size is 12,000 square feet. This is a conditional request, so the applicant has proposed some use restrictions as well as architectural conditions. So the only use permissible on the site would be single-family detached. No other uses would be permissible. The next few slides go over the site or architectural conditions proposed. The maximum density shall not exceed 2.4 dwelling units per acre. And under a PRD, you are allowed to ask for deviations for lot sizes and setbacks, and the applicant can propose those, but the council ultimately has to approve them. So this chart shows what is proposed. Some lots at 7,200 square feet, and the range would be between 55 to 65 lots, and that comes out to 32 to 38% of the number of lots. 9,000 square feet lots are proposed, a range of between 70 to 80, and that comes out to 41 to 47% of the total number of lots. And also 12,000 square foot lots are proposed between 30 and 40, and that's at 17 to 23.5% of the total number of lots. And the total number of lots maximum would be 170. Deviations to building setbacks and are also proposed in this chart here. The column on the far right shows what the applicants are asking for. So they're asking for a 20-foot front yard setback. The rear yard setback, they're asking for 20 feet. Side yards, this is interior side yards, 5 feet minimum, 10 feet combined. So that would be adding, minimum 5 feet on each side. Corner side yards, this is where a lot has frontage on 2 roads. So the corner side yard would be 10 feet. A complete detailed list of conditions are in your staff report. We will go over the highlights on this slide. So no vinyl siding would be permissible. This would be crawl space construction, no slab on grade. There would be a 25-foot setback with extra landscaping adjacent to the existing homes. A 10-inch overhang on the eaves are proposed. The minimum heated square footage, and this would not include the square footage of the garage, would be 2,400. They are proposing extra trim on the front-facing windows. Each house will have a minimum of a 2-car garage with decorative doors. Greenway Construction is also proposed. A 1/4 mile of public greenway is proposed as part of this project, and 1.25 miles of private greenway trail are proposed. Each house will have a sunroom, deck, patio, or screened porch with at least a square footage of 100. A pool is proposed, 2,000 square foot minimum. A kid's pool is proposed, 500 square foot minimum. And a clubhouse is proposed, 2,000 square foot minimum. 14% minimum tree save is proposed. Sidewalk connection from Mahler's Creek development to the entrance of Everwood along Bryan Road is proposed. So this is a new condition that came out of the public hearing. Traffic calming speed bumps will be installed at the 2 proposed interior connections. Community information. This area over the last 20 years is starting to develop into single family. We've got several neighborhoods in this area, and we've listed them here. So Everwood's at a density of 1.56 units per acre. Average lot size is around 16,000 square feet. So these numbers come from GIS. We used our GIS map to go in, select parcels, and calculate the mean or average lot size. Bingham Station, that is a PRD along Ackerman Road. On the north side of Ackerman, the density is at 2.98 units per acre. Average lot size around 7,700. Tunbridge is at a density of 1.84 units per acre. Average lot size is around 14,000 square feet. Linwood Estates is at a density of 2.4 units per acre. Average lot size is around 10,800 square feet. Grove at White Oak, they are at a density of 2.21 units per acre. Average lot size is around 6,500. Ridgemore PRD, which is under construction on Ackerman Road, that's going to be at a density of 2.6 units per acre, and the average lot size looks to be around 7,800 square feet for the lots. The neighborhood meeting. Staff identified 71 property owners within the required 300-foot notification radius, and there were 2 neighborhood meetings held. One was remote, virtual on May the 23rd, and there was another in-person meeting on June the 9th. And according to our notes, there were approximately 18 adjoining owners that participated in one or both sessions, and there were several that participated that were outside of the notification radius. Yep. I'll stop here and let Gabby pick up and go over transportation.
So here you have the Ncdot traffic counts that were available between 2009 and 2019. And you can see to the right of that the percentage increase in each of those traffic count years. And you'll notice that the largest jump in percentage was from 2013 to 2015 with a little bit over 21% growth. And on average, over that decade of 2009 to 2019, there was about an average of a 6% increase in volumes along Bryan Road. So from the TIA that was completed, the following offsite improvements were identified. The signal at Timber Drive and White Oak are going to be modified in order to allow more north-south traffic to make that more efficient. And then at the White Oak and Bryan Road intersection, the town essentially had this discussion with the developer after the completion of the TIA to have them include the construction, either to construct a dedicated right turn lane at that intersection in the southbound direction, or if they are unable to obtain easements or right-of-way, then they'll be required to pay a full fee in lieu for the construction of that dedicated right. The other improvement that we negotiated with the applicant and they agreed to was for them to contribute 5% payment towards the installation of a future signal at that intersection. And for those that aren't aware, part of the reason that we are not asking that a signal be installed now, even though it is warranted under existing conditions, is that without having White Oak essentially be widened to its future section of a 4-lane divided road, the issue at this intersection would be that there would be too much of a backup for the cars traveling in the southbound direction coming to make this right. And so the backup the cars would essentially back up all the way to Timber Drive East, which would cause other issues, and so DOT wouldn't allow that signal to be installed today, prior to that widening occurring along White Oak Road. And then along Bryan Road, there are 3 entrances into the site, so there will be 2 dedicated left turns and right tapers into the subdivision. The 3rd driveway would just be a right in, right out. In terms of access, so in addition to the 3 driveways along Bryan Road, the applicant is being required to complete a connection at Caper Tree and at Coffeeberry. And so, as you'll see, this area alone will have above 75 units, and per UDO, Town of Garner's UDO, as long as there are 75 or more units, they are required to have at least 2 points of access. And additionally, this access point on on Coffeeberry is necessary because you have this pinch point here, and so for safety purposes, in order for emergency services to be able to access, you need to have more than one access point, because if one of those roads is blocked off, you need to be able to access those homes. And so in terms of transportation improvement, roadway improvements, Bryan Road will be improved to half of its ultimate section, which is a 3-lane major collector with bike lanes, curb, gutter, and sidewalk. And fire inspections has preliminarily approved road access and the road network. And with that, I'll hand it off to Stacy.
Good evening. Again, you do have a little over 72 acres in this development with 3 varying product types, referred to as A, B, and C on the plans. And you see a range of the number of units per product type, but it will not exceed 170 total units, regardless of if there's 57 of product A, then there might be lesser of product B or product C, but they will fall within those ranges and not add up to more than 170 units total. Product A, again, between 55 and 65 units with a 50-foot minimum lot width and a 7,200 square foot minimum lot. Product B, between 70 and 80 units with a 60-foot minimum lot width and lot minimum of 9,000 square feet. And product C, 30 to 40 units with a 70-foot minimum lot width with a lot minimum size of 12,000 square feet. They are proposing the same setback on all the lots regardless of product type. Again, you see them there, 20 feet in the front, 20 in the rear, 5 on the side, and a 10-foot corner side yard. Before you have the master plan there, seeing the different amenities pointed out by asterisk, and those are also referred to in your the PRD booklet that you'll see. But a pool with a clubhouse, the gazebo, a tot lot, a dog park, mini parks, and you see the Greenway Trail, which is public, that's the blue dashed line, and internal private trails, which are the yellow dashed lines. Those are required as part of a PRD to link open spaces together between the trails and the sidewalks. There's a 12% tree canopy required in this case because it is a PRD. They've committed to 14% preservation plus other canopies such as their street trees or any additional landscaping that they may do. There's no perimeter buffers required, although again, as this will come back as a subdivision plan to us, we will recheck those at each subsequent stage of review. And there is a 25-foot perimeter setback, and they have committed to retaining the vegetation to the maximum extent possible within that 25-foot perimeter setback. The street trees will be provided every 40 feet on average along all roadways as required by our ordinance. For a PRD, it does require 25% open space. They are committed to a minimum of 27.6%. Most of that will be made up of, well, all of it will be made up between environmentally sensitive areas, active recreation, and passive recreation. The amenities, again, that I pointed out are the pool, clubhouse, dog parks, tot lot, picnic area, and mini parks, and the pedestrian circulation system connecting open spaces. There is a FEMA-designated floodplain on a portion of the site, and the site is impacted by riparian buffers along streams. Those are shown on the master plan in the PRD book as well. Site will be served by the City of Raleigh Public Utilities. Details on how lines will be extended will be worked out with Raleigh during the preliminary plan and construction drawing submittal stages. Lighting for streets and commons areas are required to meet UDO regulations. Stormwater management devices to meet UDO regulations. This site is within the Swift Creek Conservation Overlay District and is restricted to a maximum impervious of 30% for single-family developments. Water lines and hydrant spacing are required to meet Garner Fire and Raleigh water rules and regulations.
Okay, we're going to discuss the public hearing next. There's a detailed report in your staff report, about 2.5 pages of notes from the public hearing. We'll try to highlight them here in the next couple slides. The public hearing was held on August the 17th. Council asked about the size of the proposed lots backing up to Everwood. There were questions about if the grading would be done in the 25-foot perimeter setback. They mentioned some flooding concerns on Twinberry Lane. There was questions about the town's long-range plan to extend Ackerman Road over to NC 50. And also asked was if there was if the increased density was a reason for the second access. Public comments, we went through and from the staff report and tried to pull out the highlights. Some of the public comments, this development will put more traffic on Bryan Road. The internal connections will reduce quality of life in Everwood. There was some concerns with the small lots proposed and requested deviations. This would include the deviations requested for lot sizes and setbacks. Do not want any grading behind Twinberry Court. That was a comment. There were questions about the traffic signal at Bryan and White Oak Road. There were general concerns about how fast development is occurring. Traffic counts not accurate because they were done when the school was out of session. And there were concerns about the project's entrance at the curve. But we have 2.5 pages of notes from the public hearing in your staff report. Going on to plan consistency, when considering a rezoning request, the Planning Commission is required by state statute to make a written recommendation regarding the consistency of the zoning proposal with the town's current comprehensive plan and other applicable adopted plans. So we are going to go through the different plans. The first is the Garner Forward Future Land Use Map. This area is designated as medium-density residential. This land use category recommends a density between 2.5 to 5 units an acre, which could include single-family duplex, triplex, quadruplexes, and townhome-style residences. The proposed density at 2.4 units per acre is less than the recommended range, so that is not consistent. However, the proposed use of single-family is consistent with the recommended land use categories. Moving on to the Garner transportation plans, this request is consistent. The transportation plan recommends Bryan Road as a 3-lane facility with curb gutter, sidewalks, and bike lanes. And those road improvements would be done as part of this request. The request is consistent with the Parks, Recreation, Greenways, and Cultural Resources Master Plan. This site is not designated as a park land search area. However, the plan does recommend a greenway path along the west side of this project. This is along Mahler's Creek. And the proposed project does include a public greenway on the west side with trail connections to the internal trails. As such, staff finds that this project is consistent with the Parks, Recreation, Greenways, and Cultural Resources Master Plan. Okay, moving on to the consistency statement. This request to rezone approximately 8.68 acres from single-family R12 and 63.87 acres from single-family R40 to planned residential development conditional use District 12 is inconsistent with the future land use map's recommended density range of 2.5 to 5 units per acre for medium density residential land use, as the request only achieves a density of 2.4 units per acre. The proposed use of single family, however, is consistent with the plan's recommended land uses. A future land use map amendment would be needed to redesignate this site from medium density residential to low density residential. In the low density residential category in the future land use map has a recommended range up to 2.5 units per acre. Staff commentary. While the request is technically inconsistent with the adopted future land use map for overall density, staff believes a reasonable case can be made for supporting the overall request. Reasons the commission may wish to discuss in addition to their own as part of their deliberations are below. So these are some staff observations. The proposed density at 2.4 units per acre is slightly less than the recommended bottom density range of the medium density residential category of 2.5. A lower density would be more context sensitive, which is encouraged within the medium density designation, as neither the adjacent subdivisions meet or exceed 2.5 units per acre. The requested rezoning provides for the development of single-family homes with a minimum heated square footage of 2,400 on crawl spaces, which is architecturally compatible with the construction of homes in the surrounding neighborhoods. The requested rezoning provides for lot sizes similar to those of neighboring subdivisions in most areas immediately adjacent to said subdivision. The request is consistent with both the town's transportation plans and the Parks and Recreation, Greenways, and Cultural Resources Master Plan. And this applies to the town council when this goes back to them for a decision. In addition to approving a statement regarding plan consistency upon the advice of the Planning Commission, the town council must also approve a statement of reasonableness when making their decision. Staff recommends the Planning Commission find this request consistent with the adopted town plans as detailed in Section 6 of the staff report. And this is the recommended motion. I move that the Planning Commission accept the consistency statement detailed in Section 6 of this report as their own written recommendation regarding the consistency of the request with the town's adopted land use plans, and recommend approval of CZPD 20-02 to the town council. So that concludes our presentation. We'll be happy to answer questions, and the applicant is here as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bamford, appreciate it. Before we get to the applicant, which I'd like to get to shortly, let's, any questions for staff that maybe only staff can answer?
Yeah, one maybe for Gabby, and I don't want to get off course here, but are there any plans involving transportation changes to soften that curve at Bryant and Fox Walk path? Having been almost hit there a couple of times, that's why I'm asking.
That I know of, there aren't any plans to do anything about that curve.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for staff?
I do have a question. The slide that showed the study of the existing lot sizes adjacent to the development, I don't think I have that. We have that in our. Can you just show that for a moment? So the larger lot sizes are 16,000 and 14,000 in Everwood and Turnbridge. Okay, thank you.
Any questions from this side of the desk?
I have none.
All right, I did have one question. That's probably a good slide to be on, actually. Just thinking in terms of connectivity and what's been planned on previous developments and what's being proposed on this development, I'm just curious as to why staff did not require connections to, between Twinberry and I believe it's Foxbury across the creek, as well as that road further north, which is in the Forest Landing Drive. Yeah, the one across the creek. I know it's multiple creek crossings, but just curious as those were planned in the previous developments, but yet not being connected to with this plan.
You're referring to this one right here?
Yeah, that looks like it's a pretty much like it was anticipated to go all the way to Twinberry, and then the one north of that at Forest Landing, the one on the west side of the creek.
Oh. On this side of the creek?
Yep. Yeah, right up a little bit.
My guess would be just wanting to minimize environmental impacts, but
I can give a little bit of history.
yeah, if you've got some.
This site right here was intended to be phase 2 of Everwood subdivision. And the plan was, when this was developed years and years ago, that this might connect. I'm not sure who owns this land here. This might be owned by the town. No, this might be the homeowners association. But there is a flood zone here, and this is very expensive to cross. But again, this was supposed to be phase 2 of Everwood when this was developed years ago. So
Jeff, I see your video on. Did you want to add or?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the town is reserving most of its impacts for the future Ackerman Road extension on Mahler's Creek. Not that these couldn't take place, but these have not been as much of a priority as Ackerman, because I think it'll be much more difficult to get crossings for just those local streets over such a major stream.
Gotcha. Okay, I appreciate the background. That I was just really trying to understand why we weren't asking for those. Not that I'm necessarily advocating for them, but just wanting to know the history. I appreciate that. Any other questions for staff before we?
Yes, can we go back to the slide where you were talking about the lights on, the proposed, it was on proposed light, but, the traffic lights, that. So there will not be signal lights.
As a part of this development?
Correct.
No.
Because of the backup, you said at Timber Drive, going to,
Correct. Yes, so we asked the applicant to perform a signal warrant analysis to determine whether it would be justified, and while it is justified under existing conditions, the issue is that if it were to be installed today, prior to completing that widening on White Oak Road, there would just be too much of a backup. And it would extend all the way back to the Timber Drive East at White Oak Road intersection, so based on that alone, Ncdot wouldn't allow that signal to be installed there under current conditions.
okay. Thank you.
All right, well, we'll have a chance to come back to staff, but if the applicant would like to speak about the project.
Good evening, Pam Porter with TMTLA Associates, 5011 South Park Drive. I've got a presentation I'd like to show before we get into
Please.
questions. So I'm here tonight to speak upon Mueller's Creek, and we also have Rich Bardo with Core Properties and Lyle Overcash with Kimley Horn. He can speak to any traffic-related questions. Next slide. This is the vision statement for Mahler's Creek, and this is in the rezoning book, but I'll just read it real quick. The vision for Mahler's Creek is one of tree-lined streets and sidewalks on both sides of the road to foster a sense of place. Common green space within the neighborhood provides places for neighborhood gathering and conversation, while a trail network allows residents to interact with nature on an intimate scale. Mahler's Creek, with lots ranging from 7,200 square feet to 12,000 square feet and no homes smaller than 2,400 square feet, will be the perfect place to call home. Next. This is just a quick slide about the site overview. I won't repeat all of it, but again, 72 acres on Bryan Road. Next slide. I wanted to speak a little bit on the history of the project because staff doesn't touch on this, but I thought it was really important. So when we originally started working on this project, we had designed it for 270 lots, and the lots were a lot smaller and the density was a lot higher. But after getting feedback from the town and some of the neighboring folks in the adjacent neighborhoods, we decided to take a step back and see what we could do to bring that down, but still create a project that was really great. And we ended up at 170 lots, which is 100 lots less than where we started. And again, there's 3 lot sizes, 7,200 square feet, 9,000 square feet, and 12,000 square feet. And then the larger lots are concentrated in the back and around the perimeter, with the more dense lots towards the front of the neighborhood on Bryan Road. All the lots in the 8-acre portion, which, as somebody mentioned, would have been another phase of Everwood, are consistent with the zoning now. They're all going to be at least 12,000 square feet. And Mahler's Creek will meet or exceed the Everwood HOA docks. Next slide. This is a detailed master plan. The only difference between this and what was shown in the presentation is adjacent to Foxhaven, there's a couple of additional lots that we're showing as red, which is the minimum lot size of 12,000 square feet. We'd gotten some feedback from one of the neighbors, and they expressed that they wanted a couple additional of the larger lots along the north side, so we went ahead and made that change. But as you can see, along Foxhaven and along most of Everwood, the lots are 12,000 square feet. Where they're not 12,000 square feet adjacent to Everwood is likely because there's open space there, separating lots from the boundary. Next slide. These are some of the architectural conditions, not all of them, but I just wanted to touch on a couple things that we are proposing. Hardy plank, masonry, brick or stone or shake, so no vinyl siding. The homes will be at least 2,400 square feet, heated square feet, and they're all going to be crawl space. There's not going to be any slab permitted. Next. These are some pictures from the book, the rezoning book, that just shows the style of the homes and also some of the architectural elements that we're going to include. Projected home prices are $500,000 to $600,000. Again, that's projected, that's not definite. We don't know what the market's going to be. Sir, I'm speaking. So that's just the projected cost of the house. Next. This slide shows the amenities. You've seen this, it's in the book, but I just wanted to note that we are doing public and private greenways, as well as a big amenity center towards the front, some pocket parks and open space kind of throughout. The private trails, and there's something that we're calling a 6-foot side path. It's just a wider sidewalk, help to create loops through the neighborhood to create just loop walking areas and connecting the open spaces. Next slide. This chart shows the minimum commitments to open space that we're doing. Again, we're committing to at least a 1/4 mile of public greenway along Mahler's Creek on the west side of the site. Private greenway trails, 1.25 mile minimum. Minimum size for dog park, minimum size for tot lot. We're having 2 dog parks, 2 different size dog parks, a picnic and gazebo area, and some mini parks. And again, pool and clubhouse, minimum 2,000 square foot pool, minimum 500 square foot kids pool, and a minimum 200 square foot clubhouse. Next. And during public hearing, there was a little bit of confusion with what we were considering the perimeter buffer and what we were grading versus not grading, vegetating versus not. So I created a couple graphics that I hope will explain it. So everything that is in red is where we are going to have the 25-foot perimeter setback. And it's adjacent to all the lots, and there's, except a few that back up to the open space on the west side of the site. Go back, sorry. And the buffer detail on the bottom is going to be where we're proposing possible grading in that 25 feet. So the intention is to not grade where we don't have to, but there are some instances where we will have to grade, and where we are grading in that 25-foot buffer, we will revegetate. So that buffer section on the bottom of the screen is what we're proposing to revegetate with. And we don't have plants called out specifically now, but it shows a mix of canopy trees and evergreen trees, understory trees, and shrubs. Next. And this slide shows where we're going to provide, per our zoning conditions, additional screening above and beyond what's proposed in the 25-foot setback. So anywhere where there's a lot that's adjacent to an existing lot, we're proposing an additional screening of either an evergreen hedge, or if for some reason it can't be planted, a fence. Next slide.
Evergreen hedge.
Or a fence.
What kind of fence?
A solid wood fence.
That is not consistent with federal covenants as to EIS, correct?
Sir, we'll have a chance for you. Sir, we'll have a chance for you to speak.
Okay, but you keep saying words
I-
you saying.
I understand. We'll have a chance for you to speak.
Okay.
And this slide shows kind of the combination of what it's going to look like. So in areas where we're grading in the 25 feet and providing the additional screening, there's that detail on the top. And that's just a cross-section to show that it will be heavily vegetated if we do have to grade into the 25 feet. And again, if we don't have to, we still have to provide that evergreen screen where the lots back up to existing lots, which is that bottom one with existing vegetation, and then the evergreen screen planted in front of it. So either way, we're not grading to the property line and leaving it. If we have to grade, we will revegetate, and it'll be very thickly vegetated, and the screen will be required in those locations with the blue dash line. Next. Some zoning conditions. Again, we're proposing single family detached. Minimum 14% tree save, so we're doing extra tree save. We're committing to those greenway sections, both private and public. And as David noted, added after the public hearing, we committed to adding a sidewalk connection from the southern corner of our property to the entrance to Everwood. And we've also committed to installing traffic calming devices or speed bumps at the 2 proposed connections on Caper Tree Lane and Coffeeberry Court. Next. And the next 2 slides are regarding the drainage issue that was mentioned earlier. So we met with, or we had conversations with a couple of the residents that live on Twinberry Lane, and this is just a list of those folks. And as you can see, there's a blue line that runs through their properties, and whether or not it was a buffered stream when the neighborhood was developed, we don't know, but whether it be considered a buffered stream today or not, likely, but we don't know. But there is a flooding issue that they noted, so we're trying to address it as best we can. Next slide. And this slide shows the pre and post development drainage. So right now, those neighbors have just under 5 acres of area draining to those lots, which is a significant amount, but post drainage is going to be about 1.5 acres. So it's getting reduced by about 80%. And the reason is because the way the lots are graded, the majority of the lot is going to drain to the internal road in our subdivision, and all that water is going to get carried to the stormwater devices. So even without doing anything additional, we're helping the problem by 80% with the way that lots are being graded. Next. And before I finish up, I did want to say we do have a call set up with those neighbors on, I think, September 22nd to kind of address the drainage issue further, because we want to make sure that we're being a good neighbor and we're listening to them and trying to come up with a solution that works for everybody, because we understand they're having issues, but trying to mitigate that with what we're doing and coming to a common ground with that. So that is it for my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and again, I've got some other folks here that can help me answer questions that I may not be able to answer.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. With that, we'll open it up to questions from the commission for the applicant, or if we need to go back to staff as well. Who wants to start? Anybody? All right, well, I'm happy to start. I do have a lot of questions, comments, some minor, some maybe a little bit more than minor, but I think maybe the easiest thing for me to do is just kind of start going down the list of conditions, just to, it's an easy way for me to kind of follow through.
Sure, let me know what list you're going over. I got the book and I've got the short list.
I got the list of following conditions that are approximately 24 conditions.
All right,
It's in our packet.
I've got the same list.
Okay. I'm not going to go through every condition,
Sure.
so no worries there. I do have a question about the setback deviations. I'm always a little hesitant about the amount of deviations that are being requested, but most specifically, the 20-foot setback for the front yard. Not knowing what the houses are quite yet, has there been any thought to where the garages may sit? Thinking about, a lot of people drive pickup trucks, SUVs, park in the driveway. They're 20 feet long, 22 feet long. And I've walked through plenty of neighborhoods where you have to walk into the street to go around because the car's over the sidewalk. So I just want to make that's a concern I have about accessibility and walkability through neighborhoods.
Sure, so there are no builders yet that are signed on, so we don't actually have like footprints to show on our plan. So I do hear what you're saying though about cars being over the sidewalk. I know that's annoying because when I go for walks, I hate to have to walk in the street to go around a car. So because we don't have a builder, we don't know exactly where the house is going to sit on the lot. But when we go through the subdivision, we will make a note that we need to be conscious of that, so we're not creating a situation where there's cars overlapping the sidewalk. That's the best answer I can give right now, since we don't have a builder and we don't know exactly what the house is.
Yeah, I think it's understandable. I'm hesitant because I don't want to force a condition when there may be a solution that's not a condition.
Right, and it could be that garages sit further back and there's just a front bump out of a living room or something where
Right.
it just sits closer to the road.
Right.
That's likely what it's going to be, but again, we don't have a builder online, so we don't
Sure.
know exactly what it's going to look like.
Right. Speaking of garages, all right, I told you I was going to go through the list. I'm going to jump around.
That's okay.
There was a condition in here about, or maybe it was in the PRD book, a comment about if trash and roll-off containers cannot be stored in the garage, they'll be outside and there'll need to be some sort of screen. There's some sort of vegetated screen or a fence or something. It might have been in the book. So that I was just curious about the garage sizes. Again, garages seem to be getting smaller and smaller, and two-car garages are really 1.5 cars, and people do park outside, and trash cans end up outside. So I was curious if there's any provision just to accept that reality and go forward with the vegetation or fence to help screen those roll-off containers outside.
Right, well, I see what you're saying, and again, because we don't have a builder, we don't know how big the garages are gonna be, but I think that there is opportunity to put rollout carts in a garage, especially if somebody is a one-car household, they're gonna have room in a garage to put the rollout cart, so I hate to just limit it and say they're gonna be stored outside with screening. If there is room, it would probably be better to give the option that if you can't put them in your garage, then you have to screen them somehow with a fence or vegetation or something so you can't see them from the road. But again, we just don't know what that looks like. But and Rich can probably speak more to this than me, that might be something that is put in the covenants rather than a zoning condition, just because right now we don't have a builder on board.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it on you as a condition, but just something to think about as you go
Sure.
through selecting that builder and doing the house plans and that sort of thing. I did have a question, or maybe a comment about the 25-foot perimeter setback in the proposed planting plan. Yeah, I think personally, and I put my design hat on for this as I and want to do. I feel like 2 understory trees and 1 understory tree may not be sufficient. I feel like oftentimes we value trees more than we do shrubs. So I would maybe ask if you might consider increasing your canopy trees, maybe as a trade-off, reducing the shrubs. I think to try to get that more of a tree canopy space between the houses and that sort of thing, and try to mimic the forest cover rather than just a couple trees, because.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. We had a detail on the plan for a while that showed that, but I agree that we probably need to bump up the trees. So we can take a look at that as a design group and see if we can add some more trees.
Okay.
But I do think that's a good idea.
Speaking of that, I appreciate that, the idea to put the evergreen hedge where, in the specific locations. Again, just a design thing, I would like to see it, not a single species of evergreens in that hedgerow, maybe 50%, one species can make up 50%, just because.
Sure. In the zoning condition, there's a couple different plants to choose from, and I can reword the condition in a manner so that it's, just because you have the option doesn't mean you only pick one and it's just the one, just somehow introducing some sort of mix. But
Yeah.
we can reword that so it's not just one.
Yeah, I can just think about driving down Tryon Road by the golf course where they did all that work on right by the bridge, and they had all those, I think they were Leyland cypresses, and they all died at once, and it looked terrible. So.
Right, yeah, we can revise the condition to create some sort of mix of species. That's not a problem.
All right, thank you. I don't want to hog the floor, so if anyone else wants to jump in while I go through, please. And I guess kind of on that same topic, if you were going to do the evergreen hedge, would you exclude the evergreen plantings from that typical section?
No.
So it'd be an
The
addition?
evergreen hedge is in addition to anything we plant in that 25 feet that we disturb.
Okay,
It's above and beyond, yep.
all right. I did have a question on the condition for all side and rear elevations visible from the public right-of-way shall have a minimum of 1 window or shutter. My first question is, what constitutes visible from the right-of-way? Is that from
Which condition are you looking at?
number 16?
Because we revised some of these.
Okay.
And I think that might have been the we revised. I'm trying to figure out which one it is because mine are numbered differently.
Okay, it says all side and rear elevations visible from a right-of-way shall have a minimum of 1 window or faux shutter.
Okay, yep, it's number 17. Sorry, okay, go ahead. What was your question?
Yeah, so I was just, one, curious what constitutes visible from the right-of-way, and then do we think one's really enough? Is it maybe 1 per floor, or might be more appropriate, but...
Sure, so if a house is on a corner lot, I would say visible from the right-of-way would be the front and the side. And if it's just a non-corner lot, visible from the front. And obviously, the front of the homes, based on the other architectural conditions we have in here, are going to have more than that. But we can talk as a team and see if we can make an adjustment to that to have it be more than just one. It is a minimum of one, and the likelihood that it'll be more than that, given the style and the price of the home, is high. But if we need to reword the condition to basically make that a requirement, I think that we'd be fine. But I just have to talk to
Sure.
the
No,
rest of the team.
I mean, again, I think that would be appreciative, because I think
Yeah.
oftentimes you see especially a 2 or 3 story house with one window on the side is just,
Sure.
it's very unattractive. Jeff, I see your
Jeff.
video popped on.
Yeah, just to interject, that's a good point of clarification. I will say that as staff, going back and looking at these later, we do consider the sides of houses visible from the fronting street. If there's space in between the homes, it's visible. So if there's an intent to not have that, then that needs to be reworded. Otherwise, we would interpret it that way. And then just going back to a couple of your parking concerns really quick. We still have in the ordinance the requirement about driveway lengths leading into garages that have to be a certain length regardless of what the setback is. So we would enforce that on a building permit basis regardless.
Okay, good, thank you. I had a question about the side path. You show a 6-foot side path in some areas versus a 5-foot sidewalk in other areas versus, you know, from a trails perspective, it's pretty obvious. It's a 6-foot gravel trail through the woods. Totally understand, but what's the difference between a 6-foot side path and a 5-foot sidewalk
So we
along the street?
Sure. So we worked with staff on this because previously we were just showing the public greenway trail, the private trails connecting to the 5-foot sidewalk. And staff had suggested to create the loops, which we're doing, and by designating the loop as somehow different than the rest of the sidewalk. And what we came up with was having a wider sidewalk, because it doesn't impact the right-of-way width. We can still do that in the right-of-way we're proposing, but it will be wider. And we haven't really spoken about materials, asphalt versus concrete. We have a little bit, but I don't know if we've made a decision on if it would be a different material or just simply be a wider concrete sidewalk. But that came as a suggestion from staff to just indicate that there is, it's intentional, that it's a loop. And, you know, we haven't discussed the details about how, if there's signage or anything like that, but it could be that maybe signage is added to let people know that it's wide for a reason. Just, it's part of a loop system.
It just, to me, seems like such a small difference. It almost makes sense to all be one or the other, whether it's 5 or 6. And I know you're up against impervious surface limits because it's the watershed.
Yeah, we prefer not to have them all be 6 feet.
Personally, I would not be opposed to being 5 feet to save yourself some impervious that you could maybe buy back somewhere else.
We'll get with staff on that, because since that came from staff, I'd hate to just commit to it and not have that be
Sure,
okay.
just something to think about as
Sure.
we move forward. I do want to ask about that, what is shown as the blue line that goes back behind those lots in Twinberry. So we know that the Corps has done a non-determination, I believe, or they've determined it's not a jurisdictional. So, yeah, so what, that goes behind those homes that, so that is non-jurisdictional in is it a farm ditch? Is it how does it appear?
We don't know. I mean, it connects to a stream that has a buffer. I mean, you can see where the buffer
Right.
is between the lots. Why it was not determined to be buffered when Everwood was developed, we don't know. I wasn't involved in Everwood. But obviously there's some drainage there, because we've spoken with 3 of the neighbors about drainage issues. And one of the neighbors, who I don't think he's here tonight, but we've had some conversation with him, and he said it's been like that ever since he bought his house 13 years ago. So it's not necessarily a drainage issue because of our project or any, our timbering, any timbering that's taken place or anything on our lot. It sounds like it may have been that the lots were not graded properly when the neighborhood was developed. I mean, again, I wasn't involved, so I don't know for sure, but If it's not a buffered stream, which it may or may not be, it still holds water when it rains, and it's a problem. So we want to try to help that as much as we can, which that graphic, the next slide shows, the 80% reduction in drainage based on our plan. But yeah, we've got a lot of pictures that were submitted to staff that showed the drainage from one neighbor that's taken a bunch of pictures during different rain events, and it's troublesome, but it's also, if it's been like that for 13 years.
Right. Because it appears to have been a stream at some point, so.
Possibly, yeah, it might have been buffered at some point, so, yeah, it's just unfortunate. We're gonna do what we can to remediate the situation on our side as best we can.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that you're working with the homeowners to find a solution to make things better.
Yeah, we're trying to be good neighbors.
Yeah. Speaking of being good neighbors, I do appreciate the thought of trying to do traffic calming measures on Coffeeberry and Caper Tree. Are there other options besides speed bumps? I know we always, as homeowners, want speed bumps in our neighborhoods, and then as soon as we get them, we hate them. There are other traffic calming measures out there. Have those been considered, such as bump outs or, that's the big one that comes to my mind, is bump outs, or maybe even speed humps, which are slightly better than speed bumps. And
A hump versus bump, yeah. So the way the condition is worded is speed bumps or other traffic calming devices. So we haven't actually explored anything else. Anything that requires the acquisition of right-of-way may not work, but anything that fits within the right-of-way is fair game. We have to obviously get approval from the town and transportation, but we're not committed to just speed bumps. We'll do whatever the best solution is, and it may not, again, it might be a speed bump, it might be something else.
Yeah.
We just don't know what that looks like right now.
yeah, I would encourage you to consider bump outs or something more enjoyable to drive through without
Yeah, during
increasing
the
speed.
subdivision phase, that'll be explored more.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of concern about the lot sizes. I appreciate you making every effort, or at least making an effort to go to the bigger lot sizes. It's not what we're seeing in the town today. So I applaud that, but I still think there's, my sense is there's some folks in this room who are not excited about that. Are there other ways to, reduce the number of those smaller lots, or to maybe slightly increase those sizes? I know the PRD requires 3 types, I guess. So you're probably stuck with 3 different lot sizes, but yeah, I just don't, is there any way to reduce the amount and try to find a compromise or a happy medium, or?
Well, when we first started and it was 270 lots, obviously that's a lot more dense. Reducing the lots by 100 seems to me like a pretty good compromise. And I understand that the density in the front is off-putting to some people, I guess. But the way that the subdivision is designed is thoughtful in where those lots are located. So all the density is, with an exception of a couple lots kind of in the center, is all towards Bryan Road. So as you go from the east side to the west side, it gets less dense. And we also put the bigger lots adjacent to the bigger lots where they back right up. Again, there's one little exception on Everwood between one of the SCMs because there's a stream buffer right there. But, we were thoughtful in that regard, and we want to have the lot mix, and we want to be able to have the density that we have, but also balancing that with listening to the neighbors and listening to the town and taking that big step back and reducing it by 100. I'm not sure if reducing it anymore is going to appease anybody. I think that most people would rather have the whole neighborhood be the 12,000 square foot lots, but with the development trends that are happening now, we're trying to balance that out where, there's a density component that's important right now, but also there's a less dense component that's important that's adjacent to the existing neighborhoods. So just trying to balance all that out. I really don't know what other compromise
Is
we
there,
can make.
is there maybe an opportunity, and I'm just throwing this out there, as to keep the density the way it is, maybe shrink some of those 7,000-foot lots, but as a trade-off, increase the buffer between those and other uses? I don't know. I mean, I know you've got that buffer back there along, kind of that runs north-south between Everwood and yours, but, you know, looking for those sorts of levels of, you know, maybe we can get a little smaller lot size, but not change the density, but increase buffers, kind of a trade-off. 6,000 square foot lot, you lose a little bit of lot size, but you gain a little bit more buffer. Just some thoughts. I'm not sure how it would all work without going through it.
Yeah,
but-
I mean, we can certainly discuss that internally, but my fear with going from what we have now to a 6,000 square foot lot is not going to appease people that don't like the 7,200 square foot lot. They're still not going to be happy even if we end up with less of them. They're still there. They're still part of the neighborhood. It may not actually make those that are concerned about it happy. I think we prefer to leave it like this because, you know, we've got the 3 different lot sizes and we kind of thoughtfully place them in places around the neighborhood that we thought was compatible with the adjacent land uses and adjacent properties. Again, we can have a conversation about it, but I don't know if making those lots smaller is going to actually achieve much.
All right.
But again, we'll have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find a way to maybe increase some buffers in some spots, which may help at least give a little bit more separation and.
Right, and I do want to note that the 25-foot setback that we have between us and Everwood, where there's the 12,000 square foot lots we're proposing, that's above code requirement. That's not actually required. The lots in Everwood that back up to us, they don't have that buffer because they're above the 12,000 square foot. So that was in addition to what we're proposing because we were trying to be thoughtful about that. Again, having the large lots adjacent to the large lots and also adding that 25-foot buffer in there as an additional 25-foot separation. Or, I'm sorry, 25-foot setback. It's not a buffer. I keep calling it a buffer, the setback.
Okay. I've talked enough, I think. For the moment, I have more, but please.
You're doing great. Well, this kind of, my question is kind of aligned with your question about the size of the lots. At your 270 units that were designed previously, do you have an idea what the lot sizes were at that point?
Not off the top of my head. The largest may have been 9,000 square feet. It might have been smaller than that. I'm really not sure, but they were significantly smaller. I can tell you that for sure.
So at the density that this is now, which is lower than our UDO is
Right.
suggesting, right, at 2.5
Yes.
to 5. If the lot sizes were increased, the density would reduce even lower. Is that correct? Which would
That is
also be
correct, yeah.
inconsistent with
Correct.
our UDO.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, we're trying to balance the need for the density because the future land use map wants 2.5 to 5 units per acre, right? That's pretty dense. With the concerns with the neighbors, you know, trying to get a happy medium. And we're not consistent with the density required, but we're just under that, but we're trying to be consistent with development to like development, with the larger lots being adjacent to the larger lots. So it's,
And I think with that,
trying not to be too inconsistent, I guess. Is
right,
what
I think with
I'm
that
saying.
question, how increasing the lot size would make this development at certain areas even less,
Correct.
more inconsistent because we would be at
You'd have
a
less
much
dwelling
lesser
units per acre.
density
Yes,
than
yes, that's
the UDO
correct.
calls for, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
These kind of also go in line with some of the conditions, and I'll go back to number 16, the window and opening on the exterior facade kind of comment. I have to ask these questions a lot. What is the need of a faux shutter?
It's purely decorative. You can't shut it over your window. Most houses have faux shutters. They look like they could be closed over your window. Sometimes they're smaller than if you were to close them, it wouldn't look right. But It's just a decorative feature on a home.
So is the faux shutter, my understanding of the faux shutter is that it is just a shutter on the wall
Correct.
to
It's
make
attached.
the idea or sense that there's a window behind it. Is that
Well,
correct, or is it actually?
usually the faux shutters are next to the window. So you have your window and then you've got the faux shutters on each side and they're attached to the wall. You can't shut them.
Okay, so the way it's written is slightly, I guess, confusing to me, that the minimum of one window or faux shutter, to me suggests there's a window or a shutter.
Right,
That
so-
suggests there's a window, but it's not a window, right?
So, you can have a window without faux shutters, and we can certainly reword this to make some more sense, because I see what you're saying. I think the intent is that you have a window and it either has the shutters or it doesn't, you know, shutters just being an architectural decorative feature on the window. But it sounds like we're gonna probably be rewording that anyway, so when we do reword it, we will include that to make that more clear.
Yeah, I think that'll be really useful. And I think that, want to kind of make a statement about openings on sides, whether the building is facing south, east, west, or north, is that I hope that we would begin to provide our residents with opportunities to get as much natural light in their spaces as possible, as opposed to just suggesting that there's one window to meet a look, perhaps, of a side, but to
Right.
actually be performing to allow for natural light to enter the space as much as possible for these units, for all of our residents, really. And I know that there's no idea of particularly what the floor plan may look like,
Right.
because you haven't brought a builder on, or it's going to be custom or not. But I think it's really helpful to make sure that our guidelines in our developments are really trying to be performance-based for our spaces, as opposed to just decorative, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. We'll talk about that as a group. You know, again, because we don't have a builder, we don't know what their buildings look like. We don't know what the houses look like, but we will take that into consideration, because windows are obviously important for a multitude of reasons.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right, especially kind of in the time that we're in right now, where people are at home longer periods
Yes.
of time, right? And there's no
Correct.
light. And so that also is a selling point for
Yes, yeah.
your units.
Right.
And I think that kind of falls into the character of a lot of our houses in Garner as they are oriented. And based on the site, a lot of the units are either facing north, or they're facing east, or they're facing west, or they're facing south, depending on the location, the entrance and the side yards. So I think it's really important, especially if the setbacks are at such a distance, to provide as much natural light in those units as possible. So I think, I'm not going to tell you what to write, but I would just suggest that we just make sure that the development is providing more performance criteria for
Sure.
that, as opposed to just the decorative.
Noted, thank you.
I had other questions. You may have to come back to me on other questions about. Oh, stormwater. Looking at your stormwater locations, because of the existing wetlands in the site, do we think that the amenities and preservation areas around those wetland areas are preserving as much of the existing wetland as possible, and also providing it as a feature for the neighborhood?
Right, so in our wetlands area, we're showing graphically the Greenway Trail, the public Greenway Trail, kind of running right through the middle of the wetlands. That was just a function to get the minimum measurement for what we're going to include. The actual Greenway, which I think is the only item that's in the wetlands, will snake around the wetlands. We're not gonna impact the wetlands if we don't need to. So we're gonna redraw that and have the Greenway Trail be outside of the wetlands. And I don't know as if there's any other amenities in the wetlands, but we're gonna avoid wetland impacts with the amenities.
So I'm assuming that that walkway or trail, is that walkway or trail surface-based, or is it elevated in some degree, that the thought is that those are not?
Right, so if we pull it out of the wetland, I don't believe it has to be elevated. And the intent is to pull it out of the wetland. We won't have the Greenway Trail be in the wetland. This is all graphic to show, general locations for the purpose of making commitments for, the private greenway and the public greenway, the different lengths that we need to commit to. The likelihood that those items are longer than what we committed to is, especially with the public greenway, is pretty high, considering right now we're showing it right through the greenway, or the wetland, and we need to pull it out.
I think it's definitely important to be able
Yeah.
to provide natural elements in neighborhoods to move through. And I think most of my question really resides around the ability of that wetland and your stormwater management to actually be well controlled. And so I really appreciate the conversation about the Twinberry residences, that you plan to work with them
Yeah.
as much as you can to help reduce the area of the existing site that is potentially draining into their area.
Right.
So I think that that's a really positive thing, so I appreciate that you all are working with the
Thank you.
the neighbors, and so I would have loved to have heard from some of them here when we get to the public time, but thank you for that. Thank Mr. Blasco. I think you actually got to some of the things that I had on my list. I will say this, I'll ask this. Number 15, at least 50% of the homes shall have a minimum of 100 square feet of brick and/or stone masonry on the front elevation. What does the existing character of the existing neighborhoods kind of resemble as far as the front facade? Any idea?
I believe the homes in Everwood and Foxhaven have some sort of brick or stone masonry on the front of most of them, from what I remember doing the little Google Street View going down the road. So our intent is to have the homes be very similar to what is in Everwood with regards to the architecture and the style. They won't be exact, but a lot of these conditions and architectural elements were modeled off of that neighborhood, because the homes in that neighborhood are really nice. So we would like to, as much as we can, emulate that on our side of the property line.
Okay. I just want to make sure that the thought about that is also meeting our Garner forward plan of kind of making sure that we're reviewing the character of our existing neighborhoods, that when we
Yeah.
start to build, we're looking at that. So if that minimum 100 square feet you believe falls into the same kind of range as the existing neighborhoods, I know that it may change up, more, perhaps, hopefully.
Right, correct. We had to set a minimum, and that seemed like a nice whole round number to set it at, but again, it will likely be higher for many of the homes. But, having 100, 105 square feet, 110 square feet, that, we just don't know. So setting the minimum with the option to go higher, which it likely will, we just landed on 100.
Also, at number 10, each house shall have a minimum of 10-inch overhang eaves and rakes for off facades. I've seen previous developments where they listed this as much lower, like 8 inches. I would also say this as kind of a performance mechanism, is that the overhang is really to provide shade to the exterior wall to help reduce some of the heat impact from the solar radiation from the sun. So I would really try to make sure that where these houses can have a longer overhang to provide more shade over windows, if they're facing south or west, would be really, really, I think, helpful. And I think that matches perhaps some of our older neighborhoods in Garner, because they have a lot of older houses have longer
Sure.
overhangs for that.
Yeah.
So just kind of performance-based standards in some of your guidelines, I think, is really important for all of our developers to think about.
I think 8 is a pretty standard number, but again, we want these homes to be quality, so we're committing to above and beyond maybe what the standard is for some of these items to ensure that the homes will actually be quality homes in this neighborhood.
I think that that's important. I do have the same kind of question about the setback, as Mr. Blasco has a 20-foot setback in the front, and then the storage of cars on the, at the front of the house and the driveway. So if we meet the driveway distance that allows for the cars to not sit in the street or on the sidewalk, I think that really helps with the character of the neighborhood and provides
Sure.
pedestrian movement a lot easier and changes the look of the neighborhood to feel like it is in keeping with other neighborhoods.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Jeff mentioned we have to adhere to the driveway length in the UDO, so we will do that. But that 20-foot setback allows for bump outs and different architectural features, so the house is not just flat in the front. Having a porch that might stick out a little bit, or a sunroom or something that might stick out, just to give it some visual interest on the front. But yeah, we have to adhere to that. We'll make sure that we're not creating a problem with the driveways and the car overhang.
I think those are some of my major questions right now. I'm sure I might come back at a later time and let somebody else add comments.
Any other questions?
We just stem off of the conversation about the private Greenway trail versus public, just the thoughts about how that will be controlled and enforced. Is that going to be an HOA responsibility, or is it going to be based on signage, or in terms of use of what is public versus what is private?
Sure. So the public Greenway trail is a town of Garner requirement that has a very specific construction detail that will get built there. The width of the trail on that detail is what will get constructed. In terms of the private Greenway trails, those will be maintained by the HOA. The public Greenway trail will be maintained by the town. Jeff can confirm or deny that, but I'm pretty sure that is the intent. And we will likely have signage to denote the difference, but we're not going to put a gate or anything up where the public and private Greenway trail meet. We're not trying to gate people and keep them out, because we also want the residents of our neighborhood to be able to go out easily and walk the Greenway trail, and once it's all connected, they can come back home and get back to their house without having to go through a gate. So likely signage. We haven't talked about that detail, but I imagine that's what that will look like.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question or comment. Mr. Jefferson brought up some very good points about clarity about some of the conditions. In reading in our packet, condition 23, I was just a little bit concerned that this is a sidewalk connection. It's about 40 linear foot. And there is the option of the land either donated or easement is provided. If none of those conditions exist, that 40 foot may not be constructed. I would encourage the town and the developer to work together to find a third alternative to make sure that that connection is made. Because as for me, personally, I hate to go to a sidewalk and it ends right there, and 40 foot away is another sidewalk. So I would encourage that.
Right. I mean, we want to build that connection.
Something be
Sure.
made. So.
Yeah, I mean, we want to build that sidewalk. That came out of the one or both, I think, of the neighborhood meetings, that there was a desire to have that connection. Otherwise, there would be a gap of about 40 feet. But, in order for us to build that, if we don't have the space to do it, it can't be built. If the easement isn't donated, we can't build it. If we're hearing from the neighborhood they want this connection, we want them to be able to work with us too in that regard, to at least help us build that sidewalk connection, to have that continuous run of sidewalk and not have the 40-foot gap.
Right.
Because I agree, when I walk, it's quite annoying to have to stop and then, go on the pavement and then go back on the sidewalk.
Right. And my other comment is, I tend to like these developments with different type of products, and that some of these different types of products, they have different type of capacity that people can reside in, and that allows a mixture of different types of families in it. So I like what you guys are proposing here for the different type of products available. So that was good.
Thank you.
That's it.
Good evening.
Hi.
Thank you for the compromises that you've made with the neighborhoods, the adjoining neighborhoods so far. I think that that's really great when builders do, or owners do that. But I do have a question about the street widths. How wide are the streets going to be in your neighborhood?
Give me a second, I can tell you. All right, so we are showing, most of the streets are local streets, it's a 55-foot right-of-way. We do have the minor collector that runs, it's basically the road that runs east-west, where you come in off of Bryan Road, you got the roundabout, and that kind of loops around and comes back down. That's a minor collector with a 60-foot right-of-way. That 60 feet is also our connection to, I think it's Coffeeberry. There's an existing road that stubs to ours at 60 feet, so we're meeting that right-of-way width at that connection. But the rest of the roads are the 55 feet internal roads.
Okay, and the reason I ask is because I did take some time to ride through Everwood subdivision. And one thing that was really nice about it is they have really wide streets where if cars were parked on both sides, I could still easily get down the middle. And unfortunately, what we see sometimes in our high-density neighborhoods is a narrow street where if there are cars parked on both sides, it's difficult to get through.
Right.
And especially houses with with neighborhoods with higher densities where the houses are closer together and shorter driveways, as Mr. Blasco and Mr. Jefferson have already mentioned. If you can't even fit the cars in the driveway, because granted, everybody doesn't park in their driveways. Sometimes people put other stuff in their garages. And so they have to park their vehicles in the driveway. So if they have companies left to park
Right.
on the street.
Right.
And if the houses are very close together, the house doesn't have much front of my house for my guests to park, which ends up creating congestion in the neighborhood. And so as Mr. Jefferson mentioned, we just really want to be mindful of the look that we're creating
Right.
for our neighborhoods. And we just want to make sure that that doesn't take away
Sure.
from our neighborhoods.
Right.
So I would just suggest that you look at that. And then my other question is maybe for staff, maybe more for Gabby. I wanted to come back to what was already brought up previously about that stoplight up at Bryan Road and White Oak Road. Because as I said, I did take an opportunity to go over to Everwood subdivision, and I went on the weekend in the middle of the day, and it took me forever to get off Bryan Road to turn back onto White Oak Road. So I'm not sure what other options we can possibly look at. You know, maybe we deter the road so that the road goes further down White Oak so it's not so close to Timber Drive East or something. But I can just imagine if we're adding 170 more lots on Bryan Road, and if you just estimate 1.5 cars per lot per unit, that's an additional 255 vehicles. And in addition to Everwood subdivision, there's another subdivision a little bit further down Bryan Road, and the 8. But Bryan Road has really been built up. I've been in Garner for nearly 20 years, and it has really grown up in that area. And plus, there's a school that's back further down, and so I think that we really, Gabby, need to look at that if the town or, somebody can take a look at that.
Sure. Lyle Overcash with Kimley Horn can answer your traffic-related question, but real quick, I just wanted to mention about the internal roads. So the 55-foot right-of-way section, which is a local street, has a pavement width back-to-back of 29 feet. So that's enough for a car to park on the side of the road and drive around. The intention is not for people to park on both sides, right? But that should be enough room for a car to park on one side, and then, a car or a fire truck, whatever needs to get by can go by. And then the same thing for the minor collector. It's a 32-foot back-to-back, so you have even more space. We're trying to be mindful of what you mentioned, so we're not creating a parking lot on the road, right? But also we have to deal with the impervious issue too. And if we have wider roads, we have more pavement, we have more impervious. So trying to balance those out so we're not creating a parking lot in the road, but also allowing, the the roads not to be too small. That's just part of the balance that we've had to work with this.
Yeah.
But I will let Lyle talk about the traffic
Okay,
question.
yeah, because although it's not the intention for people to park on both sides, it happens.
Sure, sometimes it happens. I mean, you can't avoid it, but if a car parks on one side, it's not the end of the world. People can still get around.
Okay.
Jeff, I see your video on. Do you want to speak, or do you want to wait till Mr. Evercash has his say?
Yeah, I will just jump in real quick, just to note that the cross sections that we have now are pretty much the same as they were when Everwood was built. I was just checking their cross sections there. They probably do have a few more stretches that are of the slightly larger minor collector variety as opposed to the local street, but their local street will match these local streets. Their collectors will match the proposed collectors. And then as far as what can be done out at Bryan Road, I mentioned this at the public hearing, and I believe that the town council is looking potentially at doing a bond project or something there to get the rest of White Oak widened, because it's not going to score, no matter how bad it is, for DOT funding. But we do have a couple other developments that are coming in right there at the corner potentially. So either we'll get some widening through the developments as on that corner, or we'll be looking to supplement it hopefully with bond funds.
Thanks, Jeff.
Good evening. Lyle Overcash with Kimley Horn, 421 Fayetteville Street, Suite 600 in Raleigh, 27601. Yes, we performed the traffic study and going back and forth with the town and DOT, but the town specifically requiring a southbound right turn lane at that intersection to try to help some. It, like Gabby mentioned, it meets warrants for signalization now, and of course it's going to continue to get it worse in the future. We included about 10 different developments included in our traffic study that we analyzed, plus background growth. So things are going to definitely worsen. At that intersection, we contribute about 5% of the total volume, while other developments in the area contribute about 35%. So it's a pretty big impact. Looking at the options there, and was mentioned at the council meeting, there's different sections that are wide, and if you go up towards Target and Hillendale, how can we, just connect those two? But the, main objective would also be able to pull the additional lanes through the Bryan Road intersection. So you'd have a 4-lane section that came through, and then you take advantage, as Jeff mentioned, of the widening that Salt Hill is doing to the south of development. So what we did, Rich had us prepare a conceptual design of what it could look like and maybe should look like if you had a standalone project to where you pulled the southbound lanes through a new signal at Bryan Road, and then take advantage of the Salt Hill widening and have that be the additional northbound lane that takes you all the way up to Target, basically. And so we've prepared that drawing, and so that's could be a good starting point for the town to consider in their bond program. I've spoken with DOT about funding, but yes, it's very difficult right now for DOT still on the funding side. But so at the intersection we've contributed. We estimated the right turn lane to be about $79,000. So we're contributing that 5% of the signal. The signal we estimated about $144,000. And then also the turn lanes at the driveways themselves, and then prepare the conceptual design for the ultimate kind of section there to kind of ease that little segment through there. But yes, we definitely recognize that it's a capacity issue now, and it's going to continue to be one. Fortunately, you have a new roundabout that's going to come down south on White Oak that will give people an option to go that way as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the traffic side? I can answer those as well.
Yeah, I'm a little curious if maybe a little insight. I don't expect you to have the answer necessarily, but why DOT did not look at trying to fix that curve on Bryan Road?
The curve on Bryan Road would probably be taken care of when that parcel of land develops. Obviously, you'd like to flatten that curve, and so that's going to eat into that parcel. That's something, you know, so.
The guy who owns that land is not selling it.
So whenever that land is developed, that's be a time to take care of that.
Gotcha. And then I do appreciate the thought of trying to extend the sidewalk between this development and the one to the north. Has there been any studies to see if that's even feasible without having to do road improvements? Because I'm sure that extending the sidewalk is one thing, but extending road improvements to the north to that next intersection is a whole other scenario. So I'd hate to extend sidewalk just to have it torn out at some point when that road does get developed. Is there been a feasibility study on that? And
As far as looking at turn lanes to the northern,
no, it's more just the sidewalk extension. Maybe it's better for Ms. Porter, but just thinking about that sidewalk connection that across that property that we'd have to get an easement on, is that even feasible without having to do road improvements? And does that make sense?
which segment are you trying to connect to?
So the one that they offered up as a concession to get from the end of the proposed road improvements to the road to the north, right at the curve.
No, actually, the extension of the sidewalk would be to the south from the.
That's to the south?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Bottom of the southern property line that comes down, that's close to the Everwood driveway. It's about 40 feet there.
Question still remains the same do the road improvements go all the way to that point, or do they,
Frontage widening would go to the property line,
okay,
and that's where the sidewalk is currently planned to extend.
gotcha. I see now, I follow.
I don't think there's a sidewalk to the north there.
Okay, no,
Or anything.
that makes a lot more sense, I think.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Overcash?
I don't.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant or staff or comments? I did have one question about the SCMs. I know you're not at the design level for those, but any thoughts on what those might be like? Trying to think about, again, the character of having an SCM in your backyard. Is that something that's dry pond, wet pond, constructed wetland?
I honestly don't know. I think it's probably the base is a wet pond, and then seeing if we can improve upon that. We can talk offline and see what the engineer has done and if we can do something else. I mean, there may also be some screening. I mean, there's just some level of detail that we haven't worked through, but, you know, if it has to be a wet pond, maybe there's some sort of screening. I mean, the town has required screening, right? But maybe something above and beyond the requirement to help screen the pond from the backyards of those
Yeah, just
folks.
given the number that are in essentially backyards, to
Sure,
try to be
yeah.
as sensitive as possible to those
Yeah,
views
where
and.
the low spots are, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, we'll take a look at that.
They can be done nicely. I mean, with
Yeah.
a little, as you know, with a little effort and.
Oh, yeah. We'll take a look at that and make sure that it's something that is not going to be an eyesore in the backyards of those folks.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff or the applicant before I open it up to the public?
I guess I did have one last question about house cost ranges. You have it listed, I'm not gonna find it, that your house price point was starting at $500,000 roughly. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's the estimated projected cost. I mean, these homes aren't going to be built for a while, so obviously there's room for fluctuation, but given the housing market right now, there's a lot that goes into what the projected cost would be. Those are numbers that I don't understand or get paid to understand, but that's what the projected cost would be based on just research in the market and cost of materials, infrastructure. There's a lot that goes into that. Again, it could change. It's just projected at this point.
Is it any way in alignment with any of the lots or houses in the surrounding neighborhoods, their base value?
That I don't know. do you want to come up and answer that? I think Rich can answer that better than I can. He's done some of that research.
Hi, my name is Rich Barta. I'm with Core Properties, and my address is 831 East Moorhead Street in Charlotte, North Carolina. So the answer is, yeah, that, the home price is driven by a few factors. So when the development was originally thought of as a 270 lot, there was going to be a wider range and kind of lower price points that kind of ranged up, to the probably about that range anyway. But now the average kind of came up because the lots went down and the development costs associated with this are such that, there's a certain level they have to hit. But it is consistent with newer home development in that part of Garner now. And this will be one of the nicer subdivisions out there, but it's definitely consistent with the trend and the current values that are being achieved out there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You said it's consistent with the homes, with the existing neighborhoods?
It's probably a notch up. I mean, it's going to be one of the nicer, developments out there, modern developments, and with construction costs where they are, that will be in the range of, the types of houses Garner is going to start seeing in that White Oak area.
Okay, thank you.
Right now.
All right. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. With that, let's go ahead and open the floor to the public. For those who want to speak in favor of the project, please step to the podium, make sure you state your name and address for the record, and then we'll take your comments and questions. And we'll come back. The next step will be those who are opposed. So for those who are in favor. All right. Seeing none, for those who are opposed to the project.
My name is Larry Brantley. I live in Everwood. I've been there about 9 years now. It's not that I necessarily oppose anything, just that I don't see any consideration for the natural habitat in that area. On top of, there's plenty of deer, there's eagles, there's other animals that live in this area that's going to be consumed by homes. But also the traffic, they're only looking at one portion of the traffic, which is the Bryan Road and White Oak, and the part right there at Timber. But it's actually the whole area all the way to 70 that's being impacted by this flow of traffic. And like Ms. Ada said earlier, you can go on a weekend, you can pretty much go almost any day, there's going to be congestion on Bryan Road. If they don't consider this issue to be something they handle before the build, after they start doing all the construction, we're not going to have anywhere to go because we can pretty much track. If you live in Everwood, unless you go all the way back around towards the schools to get onto White Oak. But looking at that blue line there that's on the west side of the map that shows the Greenway, I don't see why you wouldn't access the Timber Drive by vehicle some way where you can kind of offset the traffic flow once the homes are built. Then the sizes of the lots, 170 new homes, like she was saying earlier, that's at least almost double that in traffic flow. And my only one question I do have about the subdivision that they're proposing. I see the roads are connected as if it's part of Everwood. Is that saying that the homes that are in Everwood have access to the amenities of that neighborhood as well, or is that separate? Those are my questions and my concerns. Like I said, the traffic flow is going to be ridiculous, and that curve that's not going to have anything done to it ever, because I know Mr. Sneed is not going to do anything anytime soon. I met the guy; he's a very nice guy. I don't think he's going to let anything be built there or changed. But it needs to be some kind of consideration for the people who are already in this area with 170 new residents, but the traffic flow, all the way up to 70. Again, it's almost no movement now. To add another couple hundred homes or a couple hundred residents is going to be absurd for traffic flow.
Thank you, sir. Did you, Ms. Porter, did you want to respond to the question about the amenities?
Yeah, so we mentioned this during the neighborhood meetings, and I don't know if he called in. I don't think he came to either one of them, but the developer is in agreement to have talks with Everwood about coming to some sort of agreement with Everwood residents using the amenity. We don't know what that looks like right now, but they're open to the discussion of working out some agreement on that. Thank you.
Sir, I think you were next.
Would there be any consideration for that traffic to go out from that greenway to be a driving lane versus just a greenway to actually access Timber Drive? Sorry.
That greenway shows up on a greenway map for the town of Garner. That's a requirement of our development. I don't think we'd build a road there because there's wetlands right there. So it's going to be a greenway, likely not a road. So thanks.
Jeff, do you want to speak to the Ackerman extension? I don't know what the timetable on that is, but is that appropriate to speak to now?
I can tell you what I know, which isn't a lot. There is the property on the west side of Mahler's Creek, between Mahler's Creek and Highway 50, is up for sale. There have been at least 4 or 5 different groups that have been looking at that property. That being said, there's still part of the bridge that has to be financed. So that project alone would not solve the Ackerman submittal to get it finished. But it is, again, it's one of those that's high on the priority list. It just comes down to how much of the development is going to get approved, and then how much of a gap is there, and then where do we plug in funds to try to fill that gap. As far as going northbound, the Hillendale subdivision really prohibits that from happening. The Timber Drive crossing of Mahler's Creek, that's a fairly long and high bridge. So I really don't know where a road headed that direction would even connect into Timber Drive. I just don't think that that's physically possible.
Thank you, Jeff. Sir, thank you for your patience.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Gentry. I reside at 157 Tallowood Drive in the Everwood subdivision. Been a very informative meeting tonight. I do have a couple of questions going back to the planning's presentation. Specifically, when he was listing this subdivisions in the neighborhood and their lot sizes, conspicuously absent was Fox Haven.
Yeah.
It's right next door,
Yeah.
and they have very large lots. Why was that not included? Because it seems to skew the results towards these smaller ones, which are down off Ackerman. They're not even nearby. They're not adjacent. And I believe Fox Haven is R12 as well. But
Business tables aren't 15 or something, they're big lots.
yeah, they're bigger than Everwood's lots.
Yeah.
So just from the consistency of the neighborhood, I think you have to consider Fox Haven before you consider Bingham Station, which is a completely different style of development as well. So I would like to bring that in there because the whole consistency, you're going from 16,000 square foot lots up probably, I don't know, 2,000, 2,500 square foot lots up at Fox Haven, and you're cramming 7,000 foot lots in between. So that doesn't seem to work very well. The other thing I'd like to point out is density. I have a question about that. All this green area on the side, that's wetlands that can't be developed, is that correct?
Correct.
But no houses can go in there, period. So they're counting that towards their density, even though it's not really even part of the development. There's going to be a trail through there, but there's no houses, there's no streets, there's no nothing. So they're cramming 170 houses into 50 acres, not 70 acres. So I got, that's kind of a smoke screen on trying to skew the numbers a bit. So I'd like to bring those two things out. I would like the Fox Haven information to be included because I think it is extremely relevant.
Certainly.
But having said all that, the proper zoning for Maller's Creek is R12. It should be R12. Everwood's R12, Fox Haven's R12. It's right smack dab between them. Houses in Everwood are custom built. Houses in Fox Haven are custom built. These are not going to be custom built homes. They're going to be cookie cutter homes. Maybe nice cookie cutter homes, but still cookie cutter homes. Earlier, it got mentioned the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan, or MDRs. I'd like to quote just a narrow piece of it. Encourages content-sensitive residential uses that preserve and enhance the culture of adjacent residential properties. This does not. It undercuts it. It's completely different. It is just, if you put this further down Bryan Road or further down White Oak Road by itself, it would probably be fine. But right here, no. It's just, especially when you imagine it connects directly into Everwood. Essentially, it's going to become part of Everwood. However, if you do allow a PRD, please consider that the UDO requires 60% of the houses to be 12,000, 40% to be 9,000. I could live with that. Those 7,000 square feet houses, no. That is just, it's too many houses, too close together. I mean, people, 10 feet between the houses? Did I understand that correctly? There's going to be a 5-foot setback on the sides from both houses, so they could be literally 10 feet apart. That is not comprehensively, that's not consistent with Everwood or Fox Haven. This is a completely different, this is more in tune with being a station, at least the front part. The back part is not that bad. I don't have a whole lot of issues with the back part, but those 7,000 foot lots, no. I would ask you to make it all R12. I think a fair compromise is PRD, but they adhere to the UDO with no deviations on lot size or setbacks. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
This is probably naive, but the young lady was speaking before.
Would you please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record? That way it can be.
I asked the engineer, he said it does not.
All right, well, hopefully the other mics will pick it up, so.
I'm Sherry Gracie, I'm at 132 Tallowood Drive. And my question was, and it's probably naive, but you had so many items that you could not answer because you don't have a builder. So my question is, wouldn't it have made more sense to be working with the builder so you can answer the questions? And I have another question. Isn't it South Park Development? Isn't South Park Development developing it? Oh, okay. It said that on the sheet that I got.
Please, Ms. Porter.
Because this is a rezoning, a lot of times the builder is not involved at this stage because we want this to get approved, but we don't know. We don't know if it's going to get approved. We hope it does. But to have a builder involved at this stage is a little premature. But what we do is we condition in certain architectural requirements that eliminate some of the tract builders that build pretty basic homes, right? We all know who they are. I'm not going to name them. But there are builders, whether they're tract builders or they're lot by lot custom builders. They have to adhere to our architectural requirements. It doesn't matter who builds. But again, we don't have a builder, so they could be custom. I know that there are some builders that are being talked to right now. I don't know who they are. I just know there are a couple that are being talked to. Some are custom, some are tract. We don't know who it's going to be that builds these homes. But that's why we have those architectural conditions in our book. So whoever does build, they have to adhere to those so they don't come in and just try to do vinyl siding, one window on each side, flat facades, and then leave. You know, that's what the book is for that we did, to make sure that the houses are going to be really nice. I mean, that's the whole point of this, and that's the whole point of why we're here. So the exclusion of a builder, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. We need to ensure through our conditions that we're eliminating builders that don't build as nice of a home as we want in this neighborhood. And Core Properties is the developer. I'm not sure. Core Properties, they're on the development side. So, and a representative is here if you
No,
want
it's
that
on a
information.
piece of paper, South Park Development.
Oh. Okay, my office is on South Park Drive, so maybe that's what you saw. Oh, okay, well, it's not, it's Core Properties. So hopefully that clarifies the whole builder versus non-builder thing. I just want to make sure everybody understands that we want the homes to be nice, and that's why we have the conditions and the architectural requirements in the book that we have, to ensure at the end of the day, the product is really nice in this neighborhood.
For the sake of just information, could you elaborate a little bit on is this a typical process? Is this atypical in terms of how a subdivision goes through the process? I know you've probably worked on several, so.
Right, so typically when I do rezonings for subdivisions anywhere, Garner, Raleigh, Durham, anywhere, occasionally a builder will act as a developer and then you already know who's going to build in the neighborhood. But in this case, the builder and the developer are not the same entity. We have a developer that's going to sell the lots to a builder. The builder has to build the homes in the neighborhood based on the conditions in the book that you all have been reviewing. It's not typical to choose one now. Once this is approved and it moves forward, that's when a builder will get chosen. But at this stage, it's just usually not typical unless the builder and the developer are acting as one and the same.
This is typically how subdivisions across the region
Yeah,
go
I
through
mean,
the process.
I've worked on a bunch of them, and if it's just a developer that's not a builder, the builder is usually not chosen until either the rezoning gets approved or even after the subdivision gets approved. It's very rare that a builder is involved this early on and has committed if they are not also acting as a developer.
Thank you. I appreciate the further explanation.
Sure.
I think it's helpful for most in the room.
Yeah, thank you.
Ma'am?
Well, I was just curious, I'm sorry.
We'll get you. Do you have a follow-up
I
or?
was just curious how you can approve something if you don't have all the details, that's all.
Certainly.
It seems out of whack, kind of.
Okay, I am Elizabeth Morrison. I reside at 365 Tallowood Drive in Everwood as well. I guess I want to start out with one question. I think I heard you say that the square footage of the home is going to be an average of 2,400 square feet. Is that correct?
Minimum of 2,400 heated square feet.
Okay, a minimum. I think if you take a look at the Everwood subdivision and you take a look at the Foxhaven subdivision, you will find that all of those homes are right around 3,000 square feet. So to go less than 2,400 or even to go anywhere close to 2,400 square feet is not really fitting the same footprint of what you're having on both sides of this neighborhood. So I guess we're hoping that you all will take into consideration what we have and what Foxhaven has, and ask for something a little more similar to what's there. I don't have a whole lot of issues with the way that they have come in and put in the dog parks and all that. I commend you for that. That's beautiful. I appreciate that. Thank you. The biggest concern that I have is if you take out the areas that you said, the pinch point, you have areas up here at the top where you have condensed housing, and they're going to require you to put in the connection down here on Coffeeberry. If the housing sizes were larger in that area, there were less of them, would that take away the fact that you would have to connect there?
I know we've gone over this a couple times tonight. those stubs are there for a reason. We have to connect, we're required to connect. I don't know if reducing the lots by a handful would reduce that requirement, but those 2 roads stubbed to the property we're trying to develop. The intention was for those to connect through at some point, regardless of what development occurred to the north. So, you know, the stub roads, a lot of people don't know that the stub roads get built for the vacant property to connect through when it gets developed. That's just, it's a connectivity requirement, it's a first responders requirement. I know Jeff has spoken about this before, Gabby mentioned it earlier. It's extra pavement for us. You know, we only get a couple of lots at front on those roads. We would like to not make those connections, but we have to, it's a requirement. So, you know, there's not a whole lot we can do, and reducing the number of lots would not really impact that unless we reduce them by a whole lot, but then we're talking about bigger lots, more expensive lots, and that price point would likely be too high for this area. So, thanks.
So, I guess the other question is, we have a cost associated with these homes that's $500,000 to $600,000. You're looking at 2,400 square feet for $500,000. I'm living in a 3,000 square foot home. You're going to tell me I'm going to get $600,000 out of mine?
Oh, on their prices, you would get $725.
That's right.
I'm
Right now,
just-
recently, houses in Everett would be going in the low 400s, about 425. Where they're getting is 500,000 and 600,000.
I'm just trying to understand where the numbers are coming from. And maybe it is because of the cost of materials right now, because I agree, cost of materials are ridiculous right now, but you said we're not building right now. So if we're not building right now, 3 years from now, who knows what the cost of the lumber is going to be?
They're projected estimates. We don't know in 2 years, year and a half, when these do start getting built, what the actual cost is going to be. It's projected based on the things that Rich mentioned earlier. Materials are outrageously expensive right now. Infrastructure costs are expensive. There's utilities we need to build, roads we need to build, grading that needs to happen. You know, lots of stuff goes into that cost. New homes right now are very expensive. An existing home may not sell for as much as a new home. That's because there's not infrastructure costs that are tied. Every time, you know, you have to build an extra road or a stub or whatever, that cost gets passed down somehow. That's just how developments are. I mean, if you don't do this for a living, it's hard to wrap your head around, but it is very expensive to build neighborhoods. And you know, it's only exacerbated by the fact that lumber is, 2 or 3 times the cost what it was 2 years ago. These homes are built with wood. I mean, that's what you build a house with. So that automatically makes the homes more expensive. If the cost of lumber comes down, and it could, these homes may not be that much money. It's just based on projected, if we were to sell today, we have to project a home cost, and that's what the number was that we fell upon.
And that was my point. That was the point I wanted to get to. Because, yes, you could probably sell a brand new home, 2,400 square feet, in a nice neighborhood within the next year for $500,000 because of COVID, because of the cost of lumber, because of the cost of construction right now. But what happens to these homes that are 2,400 square foot in 7 years when the cost of lumber isn't at that price? Are they still going to be $500,000 homes? Are they still going to be comparable to your Fox Haven and your Everwood? No, they're not. Would you buy a 2,400 square foot home for $400,000 to $500,000 when you can go and get a 3,000 square foot one with a larger lot in a nice neighborhood? I don't think you would. And I think what you're going to find is that the value of the homes are going to go down because of that, which is not going to help us.
Just to echo on what she's saying too, that actually happened in Everwood.
Yes, it did.
I mean, $100,000 got cut off on most people's homes overnight.
And as far as the sidewalk that we were talking about, There's another housing development just below Everwood that just got built, it's actually in the process still, that has sidewalk too. So now you're going to have a piece between Everwood and this new housing development that's not going to have sidewalk, but then both ends are going to have sidewalk. So how is that section going to be addressed?
Sidewalks to nowhere, actually.
So could we please take a look at that as well? I guess as far as the on-side parking inside of the housing developments and the narrow roads, a lane is 12 foot wide, typically. If you have 2 lanes, 2 ways, 24 feet. You park a car on either side, you don't get what you need out of what is proposed right now. So please think about that as well. Those were I just want you to take into consideration what is being proposed. Think long and hard, look at the housing developments around it, and make a decision.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. Jeff, looks like you wanted to say something?
So I just wanted to jump in with some statistics. I've just been kind of perusing some of the data that's available through the county. Again, we can't speak to pricing. That's just, one of those things. It's something that everybody wants to know, but it's not something that we're allowed to dictate within an ordinance. We are allowed, to talk about minimum house sizing. I did just a quick scan through the Everwood subdivision. There is one house that is lot 8 that is 2,300 and change. There's 2 that are 2,400 and change, and then about half a dozen that are 2,500 and change. So it's certainly not the average, but again, if we were applying minimums to that today, we would actually have to have a minimum of 2,300 square feet for Everwood for that one house to get built. So just some background information. And then the only reason that we did not include Foxhaven, I'd be glad to go ahead and compute that for y'all. But that is a county subdivision on well and septic. It's built to different standards, and it really skews things in the other direction, which we did not think was appropriate. So both Foxhaven and Hillendale are on well and septic. Many of those lots are 2.5 acres or more. If they were being built to be part of the town, which they are not, they're just an ETJ, then we would be looking at them differently.
Sir, that is crazy. The house exists. Foxhaven is there. Whether it's in the town or not, it's there. It's consistent with our neighborhood. And you just go up here and just wave your hand. Oh, it doesn't count because it's a county subdivision. It does count. It does count. And for you to sit there and just dismiss it out of hand, no, that is unacceptable. You have to count it. It's consistent through that stretch of Garner. And no, maybe it's not the city limits, but it is still Garner. And I'll be honest with you. You go down here to this grove, that's an abomination. Those are some ugly ass houses right on top of each other. Why are you building that stuff? Why can't we have some nice subdivisions? Big houses on big lots. So people want to move here and not move to Cary or Apex, where that's the norm. But I'm sorry, I just lost my cool over that, sir. You used to say that it's irrelevant. No, I can almost throw a rock and hit one of those houses from my house. That is very, very relevant. Yeah, you want to include Bingham Station. How the heck is that place even remotely similar to us?
Sorry.
It does work a little bit. Honorable Chairman and Commissioners, my name is Marshall Garrett. I live at 135 Coffeeberry Court. And we have a neighbor here who lives right across the street at 140 Coffeeberry Court. There are 2 infant children there, 2 infant sons, ages 3 and 1. And my biggest concern is not for us, particularly me and my wife sitting right over there. It's for those infant children that are growing up there. Now, I have a question to you commissioners, where would the responders, the first responders, if there was an emergency in this new, whatever you're going to call it, development be? Where would they come from? Seriously. Do you have different fire department and police department posts that you're going to be putting in just south of Everwood? Because why in the world would you do any cut through in Everwood when you've got these three accesses coming off of Bryan? And why would you even consider this development until you widen and take care of White Oak? Trying to get out onto White Oak in the morning, I don't know what you guys think. Fortunately, I'm retired, so I don't have to worry about it that much. But for all of you guys that do work, doesn't it make sense to get White Oak finished as an infrastructure project before you do this thing? It makes no sense. Does every subdivision within the town of Garner require, what do you call them, stubs? Is that right? How come we only had one? Seriously, it's 15 years old, 15, 16. We only had one, and that's our little itty bitty, what do you call it, stub there at Coffeeberry? I'm serious now. I mean, you guys have been here a lot longer than we have. We only moved here 10 years ago from Indonesia. And they said, why Garner? Kind of condescendingly, all of our friends at church. I said, because that's where we found a house that we could afford that would hold everything. And it's decent. And it's a nice little neighborhood. We got nice neighbors. But it ain't going to be nice if you put in what you're proposing. And I think it's ludicrous to consider, oh, well, for safety reasons, we need to have these two cut through. Well, only if you put a substation for first responders just south of Everwood somewhere. Otherwise, they've got to go up to the other things or, come all the way down and get into Everwood, passing up 3 entry points into this project. That makes not one sense to me as a common sense person. My mother and dad taught me to think and look at things. Think it through before you propose. I'm sure you could probably hire 1 or 2 college students from NC State to come up with a computer thing that would give you a virtual tour of what it would look like. And it wouldn't cost you much. It would be kind of fun to do a virtual tour of whatever it's going to be. Mahler Creek, the biggest and best thing in Garner. And it is kind of silly to think about. You've got Foxhaven there, and everybody said, oh, well, that's part of Wake County. Well, so is Luxembourg in Europe. But if you discount them and say they're not there, I mean, the French and the Belgian and the Germans, we don't like Luxembourg. But if you run over it, it's a very valuable little piece of real estate in the world. I think Foxhaven, it may be surrounded by Garner, but it's affecting our property values as it is. And I really consider, I figured you guys are probably on the edge of thinking forward and everything with regard to all of the, what you need to do is develop a glossary for all of us dumb people who live in houses and don't know anything about RDUs and all these other things, TIAs. I know what a TIA stands for, but I had to look it up and find out. But I'm just a homeowner, retired. I enjoy talking to my neighbors, seeing them walk through the neighborhood. And that's how I met this lovely lady and her husband the other day. But right now, I think you are making a mistake to go the direction you're going. R12, is that right? I think he's correct. Yes. I think he is correct. And anything less than that, and promising more than what it is, I think it's very short-sighted on the part of the developer who obviously doesn't live anywhere near this project. Thank you.
If there's any comments that are not repetitive of what we've heard for the last 20 minutes, I will accept to hear them. Otherwise, we will close the public comments. But we've heard the same theme. So well, I understand your concern has been heard. The rule is that you're allowed 10 minutes. I've allowed more than 10 minutes. So if there's something new that has not been said, I will be happy to hear it, but otherwise, we will close.
This guy's been raising his hand the entire time.
Sir, you haven't had a chance yet to speak. Thank you.
I'd like to professionally address, Clifford Kendall, 156 Tallowood Drive, Garner. I'd like to professionally address, though, the transportation concerns. Not only am I an Everwood resident, interested citizen, but I've spent 40 years in transportation multimodal planning, and I'm currently providing consulting services to Ncdot Rail Division in multimodal planning. We have created a very difficult situation with the developments along Bryan Road and White Oak Road. I can appreciate the town's desire for ad valorem tax revenue, and I appreciate the developer's desire to see a return on their investment. But I know it's been said, yeah, well, if we get a bond referendum, if it passes, maybe we'll put some money into White Oak and Bryan Road. That's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of development that's already occurring. You're going to add 170 more within a couple of years, and you have no firm plan for improving the transportation infrastructure. What a novel concept. Let's put the brakes on it until we solve, or at least have a firm plan for the transportation infrastructure. Thank you for hearing me.
Sir. Actually, I'd like to hear from the gentleman who hasn't spoken yet.
I just have a question about I'm Jamie Hawkins. I'm at 140 Coffeeberry Court. I just have a question about the maintenance of the roads once the stubs are connected. As the homeowner at the end of one of those stubs, I'll tell you, it would be a lot faster for me to cut through the new proposed neighborhood into my yard, into my driveway. However, I'm not paying their homeowners association fees. In turn, myself, as a non-homeowner of their neighborhood, are essentially tearing up their roads as a driver of a F-150 pickup truck. On the other side of that, anyone coming from south going into the other, through Everwood into Mahler's Creek is now coming into Everwood, not paying HOA fees because those are privately maintained roads, not by the DOT. Where does that cost get made up is my question with those stubs being connected. I'm not worried about the emergency vehicle use or anything like that. I just want to know who's taking up that cost of me coming through your neighborhood or multiple residents, and then vice versa.
The roads are proposed to be publicly maintained, not privately owned and maintained by the HOA, but publicly maintained.
By the town?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I think with that, we will close the public comment session. I think we've been more than generous with time. This is not a public hearing, just a chance to distribute information and learn information. Town council is really the place to fully express concerns.
Just a simple question.
Sure.
So after this meeting, what's the next process or next step?
All right. Yeah.
Is there anything else that we're going to be a part of?
Sure. So just as a form of information, the Planning Commission is not a governing body. We do not have the final say. Our job is to recommend or not recommend a project based on how it relates to the comprehensive plan, as well as the Unified Development Ordinance, or the UDO. Our job is to determine if a project meets those standards. The UDO is not meant to be the end-all, be-all, and the best of the best. It is meant to be a minimum. We always hope that developers, whether commercial, residential, whoever, likes to go above and beyond, but it is a set of minimum standards. So while you hear a lot in this, minimum lot sizes, minimum house sizes, minimum setbacks, that's not necessarily the absolute. Now, that's not to say that there won't be 2,400 square foot houses or 7,000 square foot lots, but those are the minimums. So there will be, chances are those minimums will be exceeded. It's up to the developer and the designers to figure out how that all shakes out, but that's usually how it works. So the next step is we will deliberate with no more comments from the public. We will make a recommendation or not a recommendation about its consistency with the comprehensive plan, with the Parks and Greenway plan, with the transportation plan. Once we make our decision, it will go to town council, which, Jeff, I don't know if you know when it might make the agenda, but it'll be, I don't know if it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks, but it'll be up, and town council will have the final say, and they're not as beholden to the comprehensive plan or the UDO as maybe we are.
Mr. Chair, it's currently projected to go before town council on October 4th, and that'll be noticed ahead of time.
Thank you. Anything else? Oh, right, Jeff. And the other thing I don't want to get into addressing every comment, but DOT works in strange ways. They typically do not do anything proactively. I agree that traffic is a problem. It will be a problem. It's going to get worse, as our traffic engineer had so clearly stated, no matter whether it's this development or the next one or the one after. Typically, the only way Bryan Road will be improved is through development. DOT more than likely will not come through and do it proactively. The town may decide to, but that means they're going to choose to spend their money on that rather than something else. So it all comes back to how much taxes we pay. So it's council's decision as to their priorities and their spending of the town's budget, whether that's road improvements, whether that's other things. So it's unfortunate that DOT works that way, but having done this being on planning commission for the last 6 years, it's pretty clear that they don't do anything unless they have to. And they prefer to put it on the developer and not themselves, for whatever it's worth. So, commission, any discussion before we have a motion? Typically, sometimes we'll do a motion so we have something to discuss, but I think given the nature of this, I'm open for other discussions or comments that may
I have one question.
Influence a motion or not.
Where's David? David, this question is probably going to be best addressed to you. Can you answer why the deviation was allowed for the 7,200 square foot homes?
A deviation is allowed to be requested under a PRD request. So that's their request, that's their proposal, and the council has to approve it.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that answers your question, but you can request a deviation from the base standards R9 and R12 that are less than 9,000 or less than 12,000 square feet.
I believe they're allowed to request up to a 25% or 20% deviation, which is standard, and anything else beyond that is, I think, council's decision.
I think that's right, 20, 30%, I can't remember the exact.
Yeah, so anything, so that first 20% is sort of a standard, but anything after that has specific approval from council. Where if it's within that 20% range, it's a broader approval or denial, but if it's above, then they have to specifically say, we approve this deviation.
Jeff, you have any comments? I see you pop up.
Yeah, I just, for a couple of the new members who may not know, this goes back over a decade. Plan districts were written into the ordinance to give developers an option to do something different. So the whole 60-40 that you see in there is just a base point at which to start. But honestly, if folks just wanted to do that, there'd be no reason to have a PRD. You could just zone 60% of your land R12 and the rest of it R9. So it was written with that in mind to allow some of that flexibility going forward into the future. So again, Chairman's absolutely correct. You can propose a certain percentage difference up to a certain point. And if it gets beyond that, then the council has to make a specific finding regarding it.
Any other comments before we have a motion to discuss?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make sure I ask this question just so that it's clarified for everyone in the room. Our role at the moment is to review this development to make sure that it is consistent or inconsistent with our UDO based on the parameters that they have provided for us at this time based on the zoning request.
That's correct, but also with the comprehensive plan as
Right.
well, Garner Ford.
Right.
So it's not about whether necessarily we like it or we don't like it. It's about whether it's consistent, or if we find that it's consistent enough, is another way to look at it. There are certain, obviously, technicalities that the comprehensive plan signify or denotes that this area of Garner should be between 2.5 to 5 units per acre. This one is coming in at 2.4. So technically, it's not consistent because it's less. Another development could come in at 3 units per acre and be consistent. And now I think to get beyond some of the technical aspects, the Garner Comprehensive Plan does allow for some judgment. Consistency with the town, the town's character or the neighborhood character. Is this the right? Is residential the right fit for this area? Is this the right? Does this fit the character and nature of the surrounding context? So there's a little judgment in that, obviously, but also to the UDO in terms of the setbacks, the storm, the utilities, the grading, that sort of thing. I am appreciative that the houses are proposed to be crawl space foundations, which I would hope would reduce the amount of mass grading. We've seen too often the terraced lots that are, because they're slab foundations, where the crawl space will allow to actually make up some grade and not, I appreciate the increased setbacks that maybe are not required by the UDO. Personally, I'd like to see those setbacks be buffers rather than setbacks. So keeping 25 feet of vegetation rather than setting the tree protection fence at 25 and only keeping 15. I know the intent would be to keep all 25, but those are some of my thoughts. Anything else we need to?
Well, I just want to make sure that we're clear that under the UDO currently that the development of this, that the development could potentially have a larger and more dense unit size, right? And which would also mean that lot sizes would be much smaller than the proposed lot sizes that are being recommended by the development?
You could also have townhomes, and you could have townhomes. I don't think you could have, you could have duplexes, you could have quadplexes, you couldn't have apartments.
So which, this is probably a question for us as a commission, which is better or worse? No, honestly, you know, which, is it better for us to make a recommendation that the potential density of this development could reach 5 units per acre, which would also allow the units to be everything but just single-family detached? Or should we recommend that based on the existing, or based on the conditions that are being specified, that the lot sizes would be as large as they could in certain areas and all be single-family detached, to be as close to the character of the existing neighborhoods as possible?
We also have the ability to amend the
Deviation.
There's things we could, you could, the base level is recommending or not recommending it as it's presented in our packet. There's the opportunity to propose an amendment that might change a condition or alter an amendment, condition, or add an amendment or take away an amendment. That would have to be approved by whoever makes the motion. So if Mr. Jefferson, for example, were to make a motion to accept it as it is, Ms. Avent, if you wanted to propose a motion to change or alter a condition or add a condition, he would have to accept it. And then we would take a vote. You may make a motion yourself that says, I motion to approve it with this extra condition or this changing condition. And that would be the motion that we would all vote on. So it's not necessarily as it's presented, but that's up to each person how, you know, if they want to feel strongly enough to make a motion in some regard or amendment.
Well, to get things moving, I will move that the Planning Commission accept the consistency statement detailed in Section 6 of this report as their own written recommendation regarding the consistency of the request with the town's adopted land use plans and recommended approval of CZPD 2002 to the Town Council.
Is there a second of the motion? So that we have something to discuss, I will second that motion. So now, the motion stands as to accept it, it's consistent.
We couldn't hear what he said.
Mr. Voyen had, well, Brian, do you want to repeat the motion?
Mr. Chair, understanding that we're entering a discussion phase, the motion on the floor is to accept the presented consistency statement and recommend approval of CZPD 2002 to Town Council.
So now we have a motion on the floor that we can discuss. If you want to propose an amendment, you're more than welcome. I'll open it up for discussion.
I'd like to propose an amendment. I propose that we do not accept this deviation to 7,200 square feet lots.
Mr. Boylan, it's your motion.
Couldn't hear it, sorry.
Apologies.
I propose that we accept the amendment without accepting the deviation to the 7,200 square feet lot. So that we stay consistent with the 60% and 40% that's in our UDO.
I can agree with that. I'll accept that in my motion.
Brian, for the record, could you state the current motion on the floor?
Mr. Chair, the amendment by Ms. Avent was accepted by Mr. Voiland. The motion on the floor is to accept the presented consistency statement and recommend approval of CZPD 2002 to the Town Council with the amendment to not accept the deviation of 7,200 square foot lot.
So it would all be 12,000 square foot and 9,000 square foot lots.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
correct.
All right. Any discussion on the current motion?
So with the larger lot sizes for those smaller lots, then the price point for those particular units would potentially increase, right? Because they're it's a larger lot size.
Potentially.
Depending on market value.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, in some cases, looking at this plan, some lots, you may see a reduction in lots in certain spaces, maybe along Bryan Road. Some lots may grow a little deeper on that back half. I'm just,
Right.
I'm making guesses. I have no idea what Ms. Porter will do with that, or what the client, or what the applicant will do with that, but I'm just, from what I see in my trained eye, that's probably a reduction of lots will happen to some level with that, which would more than likely increase home prices the way, unless they work out a different deal with the land seller, but that, who knows? I mean, there's a lot of different factors that, I mean, material price, infrastructure, land cost, there's a lot of things.
Just wanted to make it clear that with increasing lot sizes based on that, by not accepting that, no, I'm not saying that I'm not in agreement, that the cost of those houses would then change.
Potentially.
And so I want to make it very clear to the residents and neighbors that that could potentially be the case, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean, just,
based on what that recommendation is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
well, yeah, I mean, nobody knows.
Nobody
I mean,
knows what the cost.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about housing prices and what that area can support and what it can't. I live in Sutton Springs. A house in our neighborhood this summer went for $600,000, or if not more. It blew me away. Shocked. But it's not going to be the last one. And to see what houses prices are doing now, I mean, granted, today is probably a lot different than 2 years from now, but who knows what the future will hold. So, Jeff, do you want to say something?
I was just going to advise the commission that if this amended motion proceeds, you probably would want to change the beginning portion of your motion to say that you're finding I guess you're finding inconsistent because you're actually moving further away from what's in the comp plan. So just as a matter of wording.
Despite the let's see, detailed in section 6. Yeah, it says, just for everyone's benefit,
It would be inconsistent.
a determination of inconsistency with the plan does not preclude a rezoning request from being found to be reasonable. In those cases where the request is deemed inconsistent yet reasonable, an amendment to the comprehensive plan is automatically made upon approval of the request. So, ultimately, town council will need to determine if the request is reasonable or not. Right, Jeff?
That's correct. They're responsible for doing the statement on reasonableness, but you all have to craft your statement for consistency.
And since the section 6 of our agenda already says that it is partly inconsistent, that does not change. It's the magnitude that changes. The transportation plan is consistent, we are saying. The Parks and Recreation Greenways master plan is consistent with that. So
do we add that it is?
So, yeah, so the consistency statement I don't want to put words in your mouth, so tell me if I'm mistaken, but I'm reading right from our agenda packet. The request to rezone approximately 8.68 acres from single-family and 63.87 acres from single-family residential to planned residential development is inconsistent with the future land use maps recommended density range of 2.5 to 5 units per acre for medium-density residential land use, as the request only achieves a density of 2.4 units. That would go down, in theory, based on the amendment. The proposed use of single-family, however, is consistent with the plan's recommended land uses. A future land use map amendment will be needed to redesignate this site from medium-density residential to low-density residential. A density range up to 2.5 units per acre is recommended in the LDR category.
Yes.
I think that sounds like that's kind of what that's what the motion on the floor states. Are we in agreement? I think Mr. Boylan agreed, Ms. Avent agreed. So I don't think we need to amend necessarily our motion.
I would have to defer to Jeff on his opinion on that.
Did the beginning of the motion state inconsistent or consistent? I'm sorry.
It is inconsistent.
Inconsistent.
Okay.
So I think our motion states what we want it to state.
So does Mr. Vaughn have to,
I think the motion on the floor is that we find the statement in section 6 as our own, with the amendment that we do not allow the deviations for the 7,000 square foot lots.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if it's warranted for the amendment to the motion to be that the commission finds that zoning condition, what I'm seeing is zoning condition 4 about the allowing the deviation for a 7,200 square foot lot size, that perhaps the commission finds that that zoning condition number 4 is inconsistent.
So would you want to, hold on, let me find my conditions, hold on. Thank you for bearing with us, this is slightly complicated. I think it's condition number 3, a deviation in lot size and lot percentages. You would like to strike that, is that what I'm understanding?
Correct.
And Mr. Chair, just to clarify, the published zoning conditions in the PRD booklet had a slight change since the publication of the book itself, and we included in the packet with a stamp, a timestamp showing the updated conditions. So I think it might be 3 originally, and now I'm showing it as 4. But as you say, yeah.
Our packet says condition number 3, but you are correct. In the book, which is the binding document, is 4.
that's correct.
So you want to strike number 4. Is that what I understand?
Number 4 from the zoning conditions.
Would you like to amend your amendment? That has to come from you, not me.
Well, I actually didn't even give it a number. I just said what I wanted to amend, that the deviation not be allowed to allow for 7,200 square foot homes, lots.
Yeah, is that acceptable? I want to make sure we get this.
This may stretch the limits of my knowledge on the subject.
I see Jeff there, so.
I know that this is what's being proposed and requested, so I don't know if what it really needs to be is that the commission finds it inconsistent, but I'll let Jeff chime in.
I mean, I think we're all clear on what the intent is. It's just how do we word it the way that is legally acceptable and.
Right. So I think what you can do is probably just keep the existing statement, because I think we've established that that has not changed. And that your recommendation to the council is to deny the request as presented, but recommend potentially approval without condition number 4. So your statement can be what your statement is, but then you also pass along a recommendation of how you think the council should vote.
So we would recommend it for approval without condition number 4. That make sense?
That's kind of what I'm hearing, but y'all tell me if I'm not hearing that correctly.
I just want to make sure that if we don't recommend, if we recommend for approval without condition 4, that we're not, that we're still meeting the intent, because I think striking a full condition, I don't want to get in the position that it's wrong.
Right. So you're still finding inconsistent either way.
Correct.
Because it's already inconsistent because it's lower. And the idea is with the amendment is that it would go even lower still, but that you're finding that more appropriate.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing from Ms. Avent in her amendment. So I think it would be, so your amendment would be that we find it inconsistent and recommend it for approval, but do not recommend the deviation for 7,200 square foot
Correct.
homes or lots. Does that sound right? Did you hear that?
Do we need to specify number 4 specifically in
Zoning condition number 4.
condition number 4? That is not.
I think you want to strike that sentence in number 4, because I think the rest of it, I think you're okay with. The 60% single family at
That's correct.
12,000, 40% at 9,000. I just take a pen and strike it out.
So removing that.
All right. So I think our motion is to find the request inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. However, we recommend it approval to council, and we also recommend that we do not allow, or we recommend to strike the deviation for 7,200 square foot lots. Does that sound good to you?
I'll just repeat that, that's okay.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chair, the motion on the floor is to accept the presented consistency statement, which finds the proposal inconsistent, and to recommend CZ CZP 2002 Mahler's Creek to the town council, but do not recommend the deviation found in zoning condition 4, allowing a deviation for 7,200 square feet minimum single-family lot sizes.
Ms. Avent?
Right.
Mr. Boylan? All right, we have it. Thank you.
As a motion on the floor.
All right. I think we've discussed this enough. Although I won't turn you down if you want to speak anymore, but going once, going twice, I think we take a vote. We've been here long enough.
Mr. Chair, I will call the vote on the motion on the floor. Gina Avent? Aye. John Blasco? Aye. Philip Jefferson?
Aye.
Bang Mao?
Aye.
Sherry Phillips.
Aye.
Michael Voiland. It's unanimous.
All right. Thank you. Thank you to those who spent your Monday evening with us. I don't know what to tell you. I appreciate you taking your time to come out and express your opinions. I've been in the same boat. Never easy. Town council is the place to really, they're the final say. So if they have a lot more sway and power than we do. So to the applicant, I appreciate your time and taking all those questions and commentary. I know it's not always easy. So thank you, everybody. Hope you have a good evening, safe drive home. We'll pause for a minute while the room clears, and we'll have our final reports and
So, the lot size is, yeah, will be what? Will be what? What would lot size? And that's in. Okay. I've been in a mega neighborhood. I'm trying to get it. I'm like, I go right through it. And I tell you, it is hard to get out of it. That is a lot of traffic.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you, thank you.
Good evening.
Mr. Hodges, thanks for hanging in there with us.
No problem at all. Thank you all for your diligence
I'm
with
sure you
that
get
matter.
to go through this all over again in a few weeks.
Just a moment now.
No, please.
Are they gonna be satisfied with 9,000, 12,000 square foot lots?
I bet you the Guy Road applicant was happy to be out of here first.
Of course.
Although poor Pam had to present both, so she was in a bad spot anyway.
No.
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, wanted to give you an overview of the town's bond referendum that is coming up in November. I am going to play a short video first. Hang on here, a short video first. And then will not represent everything in detail, but I'll go through some slides and pause and just provide an opportunity for you to ask questions, see if there's any other information. But this video was prepared by staff, and we'll let you view it now.
Garner has a special hometown charm. We're a welcoming community with a strong civic pride and a great quality of life. As more and more people discover all that Garner has to offer, the town must follow a strategic vision to ensure orderly growth and to continue to provide the superior amenities and levels of service that residents expect and deserve. As part of this strategic approach, the town council decided unanimously to give Garner residents the opportunity to vote on 4 bond questions this November. These 4 bond questions will authorize the town to issue up to $69 million in general obligation bonds for street and sidewalk improvements, parks and recreational needs, public safety and services facilities, and stormwater infrastructure. The street and sidewalk improvement bonds, totaling up to $24,050,000, would enable investment in road projects, including additional widening improvements along Jones Sausage Road, installation of new sidewalks to improve connectivity with our schools, parks, neighborhoods, and retail areas, and development of infrastructure to support local bus transit. Garner's park system is a prized asset to our residents and a major draw for visitors. As we continue to grow, there will be increasing need for more parks and recreation amenities, as well as a more robust Greenway network and additional athletic fields. The parks and recreational bonds, totaling up to $35.5 million, would allow for phased development of town-owned parkland, including the Jurgen property on East Garner Road and Meadowbrook near White Oak Road, rehabilitation of some existing parks and recreational facilities, expansion of Garner's Greenway system, and future parkland acquisition. Maintaining strong public safety services in all parts of Garner is and always will be a top priority for the town. The Public Safety and Services Facilities bonds, totaling up to $6.5 million, would enable the town to partner with Wake County EMS to build a joint-use facility that would serve as our community's 5th fire station in a fast-growing area in Garner's southwest, around U.S. Highway 401. A big part of Garner's charm lies in its older, established neighborhoods, but some of these neighborhoods have aging stormwater infrastructure that has not been updated in decades. The stormwater bonds, totaling up to $2,950,000, will be used to upgrade old and aging storm drain infrastructure to ensure proper drainage of town streets. If voters approve the bond questions for all 4 of these categories, the town anticipates an estimated property tax increase of 2 cents per $100 assessed property value to finance the bonds. General obligation bonds are the town's most fiscally responsible option for financing large capital projects. Garner has earned extremely strong bond ratings from S&P and Moody's, and this would enable the town to secure low interest rates for the bonds. Early voting for the November municipal election that includes the bond referendum begins October 23rd, and Election Day is November 2nd. Garner's future is bright, and our community will see new economic, recreational, and cultural opportunities through wise planning and investment. Help shape Garner's future by making your voice heard in the upcoming bond referendum. To learn more about the 2021 bond referendum, visit garnerbonds.com.
So it gives you a good overview of what the bond program is going to contain this fall. Let me see if I can get to the app here without. Again, I'll go through a presentation. Some of this will be repetitive from what you just heard, but I'll be glad to stop. And if you have questions along the way, please don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask as we're going through this. So as we mentioned in the video, general obligation bonds is what voters will actually be approving us, giving us the authority to issue. This, as the video said, is our most affordable way to borrow money for capital improvements. And Garner is very fortunate that we've got an excellent bond rating so that when we go out to issue these bonds, we get very, very favorable interest rates on the borrowing. Back in 2013, voters did approve $35.7 million in general obligation bonds. Most of you are familiar with a number of the projects that we did through that bond, including the facility that we're sitting in today, our police station that is on this campus, our Garner Recreation Center that is now open, and if you haven't had an opportunity to go there yet, we hope you will soon. Dog parks in in our parks. Sidewalk projects, a number of them around town. This is one of our most recently completed ones that is New Rand Road, and that is drainage infrastructure and sidewalks that now connects the historic downtown area to Highway 70 with a pedestrian crossing for Highway 70 and some signal improvements at Highway 70 that in addition to sidewalks actually helps some of the through movement on Highway 70. You will have an opportunity as citizens to vote. And on November 2nd, if the questions are approved, we'll have the authorization to borrow the $69 million, as mentioned before, in the 4 categories that you heard about in the video: parks and recreational bonds, street and sidewalk improvement bonds, public safety and services facilities bonds, and stormwater bonds. I'll say real quickly that we don't choose the names of these categories, and if they don't sound really intuitive, it's because there is legislation that dictates the way in which we have to word these things. When you read the questions at the ballot that day, they will sound even less obvious, so just know that that is not us choosing to use random words. That is just bond counsel directs us into how we can go about wording those based on state law. The first category is parks and recreational bonds, $35.5 million. 2 of the really big things that we'll be working on there is phase development of parklands. The video mentioned the Jurgen property as well as the Meadowbrook property. Those are two of the places that we'll be investing, but we'll also be working on existing park facilities with rehabilitation of some of our existing facilities. We'll be expanding our Greenway system. We hope that our first project will be a major greenway that runs along Buffalo Road on the other side of Lake Benson, so that all the neighborhoods out towards 401, like Vandora Pines, and the traffic circle there can get connected. Those neighborhoods are not connected together by sidewalks, so we can connect all those neighborhoods together and then get them over to White Deer Park and Lake Benson Park using either a route through the City of Raleigh easement or across the lake on a pedestrian bridge that would be near the vehicular bridge. So that's one of the projects we've already identified that we would be moving forward with. And then our recently updated Park Restoration and Cultural Resources Master Plan identifies other greenway connections that we'd like to make. These monies could also be used for future parkland acquisitions should an opportunity arise. We do like to continually look for opportunities to diversify where in town we have park facilities, especially out in some of the growth areas like the areas you've been talking about tonight. Second question is street and sidewalk improvement bonds, $24.05 million, which will allow us to take on a number of projects. One of them, probably the most visible that we're already in the planning stage for now, is continuing the widening of Jones Sausage Road from where the Amazon project stopped its widening, and that will take that widening all the way to Garner Road. The future plan that will be outside of the scope of this bond would be to then take the 4-lane widening from Garner Road to Highway 70, and that would go straight across with a grade separation of the railroad track, and it would eliminate that pretty treacherous dog leg type curve that goes over the railroad track that's behind the school and going behind Cabela's. Again, that won't be a part of this bond. That'll be a coordinated project with North Carolina DOT Rail Division, the North Carolina Railroad Company, and we hope other funding partners. Once that section is complete, then we envision that Jones Sausage Road will then go from 70 all the way to Timber Drive, where it will terminate, and that will create a 4-lane thoroughfare with an exit off of I-40 that would really be somewhat of a game changer for transportation network here within Garner.
So you didn't want to pick White Oak or Bryan Road for widening?
Actually, council has talked about that. I mean, so y'all talked about it a little bit tonight. There was some mention of bonds. When that project was before council for the public hearing, there was some acknowledgement by council that part of the sections of White Oak Road may be ones that we could try to help affect the widening so that the signal could then be put in place, because it was mentioned, and I think Ms. Ava clarified it with a question about did she understand that that's partly why we couldn't put in the light. So council is looking now at some of those things to say where should we prioritize those. Ackerman Road was also mentioned tonight. Way back, we had been thinking that Ackerman was a good connection for us to make that would relieve some pressure, but with the land that would go through now in play, there's a good likelihood that development would take care of building most of that, and we would just have to help build the portion of the bridge that crosses the creek. And so we're now trying to reprioritize those things to see where does our money go the furthest. But some of those pinch points like that and Highway 50 are areas that council has us looking at. So we know we can't go in 4-lane Highway 50, but there are some sections of Highway 50 that we have accepted some fee in lieu that was voluntarily given in addition to road improvements that were required to allow us to do some infill work on 50. If you think about Hebron Church Road back to Timber Drive, any of the areas that don't have a third dedicated lane, if we could go in and help get a continuous third lane for turn movements, then while it's not a 4-lane, it is, we think, helping substantially with that corridor.
And is my sidewalk on there, John?
Yes. So it is.
John,
good
John and I have been
segue.
going back and forth for years.
Good
There's a little
good
section of
timing.
sidewalk on
Good timing.
Bryan Road.
And so I don't have it in this presentation. We're actually going to add a few of them, but there's 3 connectors that we know will be in the top of the list for sidewalks. One is connecting from where the YMCA is built to the neighborhood down the street. That connection there's a gap there, so we're going to make that connection. It's not a very long one, but it's a very important one now that we have the YMCA as an amenity for the town, because then you can leave the YMCA, and while there is a trail in the back that connects to White Deer Park, you could then connect along Avisboro Road. One of the connections is along Garner Road from a Vandora West subdivision, which is at the head of Vandora Springs, where Vandora Springs dead ends into Garner Road. There's a gap from there down towards the historic downtown area, I think to Purdue Street or the next street that was never finished. So that would give another point of connectivity for all the neighborhoods around School Acres, all in that area, and would fill that gap. And then the one that Mr. Blasco is talking about is a section that is on Bryan Road. When Wake County Schools built the elementary school and have the rest of their land for the middle school, they completed sidewalk along their frontage, but before you get to Ackerman, there was a wetland feature or stream feature that was going to be too costly to be practical to do at the time. And so we allowed Wake County to stop short of that because there wasn't a great practical and affordable way to connect that. So that we are starting the design now on that, so it'll connect the rest of Bryan Road to Ackerman Road. So yes.
From Sutton Springs to that sidewalk that's there, you have to hop a ditch, which is a pretty substantial ditch. It's probably 3 feet deep and
yeah.
3
So
or 4
we'll
feet
be,
wide.
so we know some of those gaps were things we wanted to do in the 2013 bonds, but we simply didn't have enough funds to do it. Some of those projects, just continued increasing cost. We're now working, the Planning Commission's already worked through a prioritization for some of the sidewalks as well, and council's working through that now. We also are going to be looking at some of the other factors like safe routes to school, and see where we can fill in some gaps that qualify for safe routes to school funding. And then we always are trying to prioritize these projects with roads and streets and sidewalks to say, how can we go leverage partner funding to get the most impact for our dollar? So North Carolina DOT, as y'all mentioned several times tonight, funding is restricted, but one of the ways we can get to funding, there's allocations of funding that trickle through our Metropolitan Planning Organization, and we apply competitively for those funds when we have a qualifying project. So the roundabout that we're going to build on Ackerman, Hebron, and White Oak, just down from the intersection you talked about tonight, that is a project that we applied for and are receiving LAP funding for 75% of the cost of that roundabout. So Garner's putting in 25, we're getting 75 contributed. We think that's a pretty good return. The sidewalks we completed on Timber Drive to connect from about where the Greenway comes out all the way back up to Walgreens, we got an 80% funding match on that, so we only contributed 20% to that project. So we will take the prioritizations from you and council, but then we'll also take a look at it with a filter of where can we go maximize the dollars the best for that investment. And then one of the other things that I know will be important to Planning Commission members is we'll have some dollars in this bond question to invest in infrastructure for local bus transit service. So for anyone who's not familiar, we've enhanced our local bus transit services provided by City of Raleigh immensely in the last 2 years through the Wake Transit investment. We are going to be getting a leg of the bus rapid transit system coming from downtown Raleigh, which will come down Wilmington Street and then come into North-South Station in Garner. And that bus rapid transit is buses in a dedicated lane or a dedicated shoulder, median most often, that actually have signal control of the signals. So it's sort of a speedy bus that runs very frequently and very fast, and so there'll be a leg that's being worked on now from downtown Raleigh out to Wake Med along New Bern Avenue. That'll eventually go further. There's another leg that will go out western to connect to Cary. We'll have one leg that comes to Garner at North-South Station. And so what we've been planning is a circulator bus route that helps connect the existing amenities around Garner, like White Oak at the other end of 70 with North-South Station on the western end. And so we've already planned and adopted a route that we would run a circulator bus system to connect the bus rapid transit, the other bus services, and some of the key amenities. And we'll actually do a loop through our downtown now that we've got more activity and amenities in our downtown. So we've got that plan ready. We're just waiting for the right year to apply for the operations funding, but we know we'll need to invest in some infrastructure like bus stops, maybe transfer station, things like that. So that's what some of these bond funds will be used for in this question.
That's great to hear. Really great to hear that. Thank you for
public safety and services facilities, we're growing, as the video said, we're growing dramatically, and especially out in the 401-1010 area. The growth that's coming out there, that area is very hard for us to provide public safety services to, because traffic is tough enough that you just can't meet some of your times that you really want to have. And those times make a difference in lives, they make a difference in insurance rates, they make a difference in a lot of ways. And so we are having a unique opportunity here to partner with Wake County EMS, who also needs a station in that area. So we're working with Wake County Facilities to design and jointly build a facility that will be for Garner Fire, our 5th station, but also with Wake EMS contributing about 30% of the cost of the building. So again, we're trying to leverage taxpayer dollars every time we have an opportunity to and get more infrastructure for that. We also were able to make to secure land out in that area off of a little road called Caddy Road, which is really near the intersection of 1010 and 401. We were able to secure some land back before land prices got really outrageous, so that we have a place to build it on as well. So we'll continue to have the land control there, and then partner with Wake County for the facility. And then we'll have a small little touchdown space for police, so that if they're way out in that area, they'll have a little small spot that they can work out of as well. That's actually a rendering. You may have seen it in the background of the video there, but that's what this is going to look like. And then our last bond question is stormwater bonds. Probably the least exciting of all these to folks, but as the video said, we've got a lot of established neighborhoods around town, and underneath the streets and through the backyards of those neighborhoods, there's a lot of stormwater infrastructure that has not been well maintained for many decades. And so we did a study a few years ago of all of the pipes that are 30 inches in diameter and larger. And so we have projects identified already that will use most of this $2.95 million, so that we can go and proactively repair or replace those. This is one of those things that people don't really usually care a lot about until the water's backing up in your yard, or your car is the first one that goes into the hole that gets created because the pipe burst underneath the road. So when that happens, it usually draws more attention to it. And some of our established neighborhoods like Greenbrier and others, we've had a number of failures in the last few years, and we actually spent 2013 bond dollars helping fix those. So we're asking voters to help us allocate some specifically to go out and be proactive with those.
With the stormwater stuff, has there been any discussions or thoughts about trying to implement some low impact development strategies, green infrastructure, not obviously across the board, but looking for opportunities where maybe we could fix some stormwater stuff with a little bit more, less pipe and a little bit more planted area?
We're especially looking, well, right now we're looking at it for projects that we're building more so than, I don't know if we're really addressing that much in our UDO rewrite, but I know that for the park projects that we're looking at now, we're looking at how can we make those as low impact as possible going forward. So we'll continue to look for those. There's also another opportunity for funding. There's some matching grants, there's some additional dollars that are coming through the ARPA funding that was part of the COVID relief that we're hoping that will open up some additional funding opportunities so that we can go out and do even more than that $2.95 million in that type of project. So the thing that everyone really wants to know about is what's this going to do to the tax rate if we borrow $69 million? So important for citizens to know that back when we adopted the 2013 bonds, our town council put in place something they developed and called the Revenue Savings Program. And this is basically a long-term savings account that every year any growth over a certain percentage goes into a savings account. And it's there and it's accumulating every year, compounding, and it's dedicated to capital infrastructure needs. So if we had not put that into place, this $69 million of debt we're asking the citizens to let us take on would have cost about a 7.72 cent tax increase. Instead, we're being able to do it with just a 2 cent tax increase. So while no one ever wants to raise taxes, a 2 cent tax increase to be able to borrow $69 million is a really, really, really good return for our residents. So for the resident with the average home valuation of $233,000 right now, that's about $46.75 a year. One thing that we use in our budgeting that you may have seen this chart before, but we wanted to mention it when we talk about tax increase, is the actual effective tax burden on citizens in Wake County. And so when you look at Garner's tax rate compared to other Wake County municipalities, we're sort of middle to upper of the class in terms of the actual percentage that tax rate is. Ours is at 51.21 cents. So you see we stack up mid to high in there. But what that doesn't tell you is all the other fees that many other municipalities charge, like trash collection fees that you don't pay in Garner, stormwater fees that you don't pay in Garner, higher water rates that you may not pay, that you may pay if you're not in a community like Garner that made a decision to partner with the city of Raleigh. When you factor all those in and apply the tax rate to an average house price in town, Garner actually has the lowest effective tax burden of any town in Wake County. So you see that $18.91 compared to the numbers that keep going down there. So it's great that we've got a lowest effective tax burden, but it's really challenging to be a growing progressive community and have the lowest tax burden, because that means we really have held off investing in ourselves for a very long time. And so we want to keep it as low as we can. We're doing strategic things to keep it low, but we want to make sure voters understand that it's not just the tax rate to look at to know how we stack up against others. You actually have to factor in all these other costs with that. So again, this will be on the November 2nd ballot. We have a website, garnerbonds.com, that will get you more detailed information, and we're continuing to add information to that. There's actually a very good little stormwater video that we're going to be posting soon that our communications staff here has actually made an attempt at making stormwater more understandable for everyone. It's a really cool animated feature, so take a look for that sometime. Early voting does begin at Avery Street Recreation Center on October 23rd. And then if you do have any questions about voting and details, we do always ask that you go to Wake County Board of Elections, just to make sure that we're not providing any information that may not be current or accurate. But for bond information, you can visit Garner Bonds. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Nicely done, John. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's very detailed. Thank you for that.
Looking forward to seeing how it turns out and what we can get out of this.
Thank you.
And I love stormwater, by the way. So I'm waiting for that video.
Take a look at the video. It's really low.
All right, Jeff, what you got for us? Do you sleep? We wouldn't blame you.
I know, right? Leave, that's my bedtime.
Here he is.
No, I'm sorry. I had a sick family member, so I had to step away for just a second. The timing's always impeccable.
No worries.
So thank you. Just had a couple of things that I wanted to remind. Of course, now I'm out of breath. Let me go back here. Brian put together some things for me earlier today. Just a reminder for those of you attending the legislative zoning decisions workshop tomorrow evening. I believe we have all the logistics worked out for that, and I hope that it's very informational for all of you who are attending, that you'll find it helpful. Let's see, we held, thank you to those who were able to attend or at least listen in on our last joint work session. Please be reminded that we have another one coming up this month. If you're not able to attend, please do go back and watch those, either on Facebook or YouTube when you have time. Let's see, we did also recently tape a public informational, our third public informational meeting on the UDO rewrite. So that is posted and online as well. So that's another informational tool where we go over a lot of the same information that we do in the work sessions, but we try to do it in a manner that may be a little more digestible for the general public. We do have one final UDO steering committee meeting on Thursday, the 23rd. So for those of you who are serving on that committee, please don't forget that. And for those of you who know Elizabeth in our department, if you want to this week, please feel free to reach out to her and wish her well. She has taken a job as a planner 2, I believe, in Atlantic Beach. So she's beach bound, which I know has its pluses and minuses depending on what time of year it is. But hopefully that'll be a good move for her. Otherwise, council activity since your last meeting, the Weston Road subdivision that was approved, and also the zoning map amendment for 900 Rand Road, which is the site for the VA clinic, and the special use permit hearing for that is coming up at the next council meeting. So I think that's all that I have, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, unless you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. I don't have any further follow-up questions. Anybody else?
No.
All right. So when I adjourn the meeting, the camera's off, right?
I think it runs a couple more minutes, but yeah.
All right. I'm going to adjourn.